Scheduled City Council meeting for Tuesday, March 3rd. We're going to have the invocation read by our Mona Schilling in the clerk's office, and then we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance led by Council Member Nickel. If you could all please rise.
Okay, as we assemble here this evening, we pray for assistance in conducting our community affairs. Grant all those in attendance the gifts of wisdom, understanding, strength, and patience. May the decisions made here this evening result in the growth and prosperity of El Segundo. Thank you. Amen.
Right hand over your heart and join me. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you very much, Councilman Nickel. Roll call, Madam Clerk, please.
Councilmember Pimentel?
Here.
Councilmember Nickel?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Burstek?
Here.
Mayor Boyles?
Here. Okay, now is the time and place for public communications, and I would like to point out that the public hearing for short-term rentals was closed as of February 18th. So if you're here to speak about short-term rentals, please do so now. And there's some speaker cards with Mona right there. If you'd like to speak, you can fill those out. I have one so far, which is Randy Collins.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and Council, City Manager. Thanks for the opportunity to be here today. Just have a quick update on what the city is doing in regards to the coronavirus issues that we're seeing so much about in the media. First, I'd like to just really preface it with, at this time, there's no immediate threat to the general public and no special precautions are required. Los Angeles County residents, students, and workers and visitors are encouraged to engage in their regular activities and practice good public health hygiene as the height of this flu season is really upon us across the country. So that being said, in regards to the coronavirus, just a little synopsis of what's going on globally and then bringing it down into Los Angeles. 92,861 people have been diagnosed with the coronavirus, and 86% of those are in China. So containment has been really good in China in terms of that, trying to keep them contained there and dealing with it there. There are 122 cases in the U.S. with 9 deaths, and there's only 1 case currently in the Los Angeles area. So what I'd really like to communicate to you, first and foremost, is that the city is taking all appropriate precautions to prepare El Segundo for any eventuality that may come about from this potential epidemic or pandemic. First and foremost, I will tell you that what's happening here is just outstanding and great leadership from the city manager on down to the department heads. They are doing daily meetings and a huge amount of exchange of information. Emails are going all day as new information comes available. So there's lots of good coordination across all aspects of the city government. And I can tell you personally, from an emergency management standpoint, that makes my job a whole lot easier because my job says I'm an emergency management coordinator. Well, when people are coordinating, I get to sit back and enjoy the fruits of that. So it's great that the city is working well together. We are also communicating externally. We're participating in routine public health conference calls with the Department of Public Health, as well as meeting with external stakeholders such as LAX. And so as we continue to look at all the stakeholders who may be involved in such an epidemic or pandemic in El Segundo, we are making sure that we're reaching out to those actors. mitigating actions that are being taken and others are being considered. So we're looking at what we need to do from a city from a continuity of operation standpoint. We're looking at long-term effects that this could bring to the United States and to El Segundo, and we're considering those and preparing to take action on those if trigger points are met. The latest information that we have from LA County Health and the CDC is, number one, that the strategy has changed and is switching from a containment perspective to a control perspective. We want to slow the way that it evolves into the United States. I think that the experts have realized there's no way to stop it, but we do want to control it, and they've indicated that it's impossible not to have more cases here in Los Angeles. So we can expect that. They're also on the alert for community-based spreading, meaning it's not person to person where I know I may have received it from this person who was, who traveled to China. Now we're looking for transmission based on I got it, but I'm not sure how I got it, and that's what we're considering community transmission. And then one thing that we need to note is that there is a high likelihood that there will be an impact to businesses, schools, and the economy. So that's something that we need to pay attention to, because at some point there will be a school or schools, there will be a business or businesses that somebody has come in contact with the virus and has been diagnosed with it, and then there will be conversations about what and how to handle that particular situation. But we should be able to, we should expect to deal with that and expect that may occur even in El Segundo. On a community or organizational level, I would say that we are planning, we should plan and consider contingencies. We should be looking at our continuity of operations plans and making sure that we're dusting that off and updating it and having those conversations, and I assure you that we are. We should also consider work at home possibilities. What can we do remotely via technology these days so that we can keep people isolated and keep things functioning? Even if we have to kind of vacate some offices or whatever the case may be. And then we should also embrace relaxed illness policies. So instead of pushing employees to get that 3-day notice because they felt ill and home and they need a doctor's note, don't push them into the health system where it might be overwhelmed anyway, or where it might increase spread. So if we can relax some particular HR standards, that's what's being recommended currently. And then at the individual level, in terms of mitigation, first I would tell you, stay at home, stay at home, stay at home, and did I mention stay at home? If you are feeling ill, if you are feeling the sniffles, if you are feeling flu-like symptoms, don't go out, don't go into the public, don't go to work and potentially contaminate other people. So we would highly encourage this to stay at home. Also social distancing, reduce or actually eliminate handshakes, hugs, anything that is close proximity that is encouraging person-to-person transmission. We want to eliminate that in our normal daily lives. Increase washing hands, as well as increasing the time that you're washing hands. 20 seconds, making sure you're using plenty of soap, hot water, and that sort of thing to make sure you're using the good hygiene practices that prevent transmission. If you're going to cough or sneeze, focus on doing that in a more appropriate way, like within your elbow and into your sleeve versus in your hands or something, where that's eventually going to either get in your eyes or whatever, or obviously transmitted through any type of contact that you have, or putting it places where other people are going to put their hands. And then finally, prepare your families. Prepare your families for the realities of what may happen in terms of, we talked about business preparedness and what to do when, when you may have to shut business down. Well, those are going to have effects on the family. So if school's closed, now you have a child care issue. Mom or dad has to go to work. And then now you have to figure out, well, who's going to stay home with the child? Different things like that. So having personal preparedness plans, like we always preach about any level of preparedness, is something that we would encourage to the general public, and making sure that they've thought through some of those contingencies as well. And that's the end of my report, pending any of your questions. Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor.
Randy, thank you. Excellent. Appreciate that. In terms of prepping the family, I'd also read recently to stock up as if you would for a catastrophe. What would you recommend there?
Yes, sir. That's a great point. And just like you prepare for an earthquake and have food on hand, we would also recommend that. With the emphasis being you may be at home for quite a while, whether you're taking care of a sick child for a long duration, or whether you're taking care of yourself, for a long duration while you're sick and while you're waiting to be cleared to go out. So you want to make sure you want to stock up on those types of canned foods. And my favorite while being sick is chicken noodle soup, right? So, but stock up on the food, the water, and make sure you have enough supplies to get you through. So you're not being pressured to go out and find resources while you're sick or whatever. So, or somebody that you may have contaminated within your own home is also going out. Maybe they don't have symptoms, but they could be a carrier. So again, to the extent that you can isolate and be self-sustaining at home with those disaster supplies, just like we preach for earthquake preparedness, it's the same principle. Great point.
Who gives the guidance when we tell our corporate residents to start having their people telecommute? Is there a messaging system for that, or are we going to be the messaging agent for that, or are we going to wait for the county or CDC? Who's going to be the carrier of that message, or will that be local, or will that be regional?
If I understand your question, sir, you're concerned about if, hey, there's somebody or a group of people that has been found in an area of business that have been diagnosed with the virus, and so the recommendation is to close that place down for a time. And the way that is, and the good thing is, this will happen slowly. It's not like things are going to, come in and happen quickly. So it's going to be a good conversation. It's going to be a good assessment, an epidemiological assessment with the health department. We will be there with them, and as well as the stakeholders of the organization. They obviously have to be very careful about HIPAA rules and everything else too. So it'll be a group discussion, but ultimately it'll be the health department making that recommendation as to whether it needs to be closed down for a time period. And so that's who we'll look toward guidance, but it will be a collaborative effort.
And are you working with the school district on this? Are they looking to us to be the central point of planning, or do they have their own plan that we need to marry to?
The school has their own plan, but we will continue to look to them as a quasi El Segundo entity and support them and their needs, just as we do in any of our other incidents and hazards. So we're focused on making sure that they have the resources they need and the guidance that they need. And in another great piece of this, the coronavirus thus far has really been focused on major impacts on the elderly and immunity deficient kind of folks, but to the young people it's been minimal impact, so we're encouraged about that.
I would say, and this might be more for the city manager, it may be worthwhile for us. I know a lot of our disaster planning goes around natural disasters or sort of force majeure sorts of things, not so much this. It may be worth just teasing out a refresher so we see what the decision trees look like if there is an incident or a significant outbreak, or if all the kids are out of school. That'd be something that I think that we'd probably get some value to know where we are supposed to be, because I know you know where you're supposed to be. So.
Yes, sir.
Right. And to those lines, I mean, I'd like to make sure that they know that if they make a decision to close down an office or do telecommuting, that they're notifying us and they have a place to notify us so that we can ensure our residents are aware that, they've closed down X building for coronavirus. So so that we have information flowing both ways.
Yes, our lines of communication with the Department of Public Health are...
Not with the department, but companies.
Oh,
So if a
okay.
company
Yes.
decides,
Yes, I'm sorry. I
and they're
misunderstood.
working with the Department of Health, then to make sure we're in the triangle of information.
Okay, I understand. Thank you, ma'am.
Just one other thing I read was that if you have not had the flu shot, get the flu shot, because I forget the term, but if you get the flu and this at the same time, you're way more likely to have issues.
Double trouble is definitely not a good thing, but definitely the recommendations from the CDC and LA County Health Department is get the flu shot. It's not necessarily effective against the coronavirus, but it is flu season, and that's always a best practice.
All right, thank you. We're in good stead as a city with you leading emergency preparedness. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, one thing to add for the viewing public, people in the audience here, feel free to go to the city's website. We have the coronavirus front and center, and there's additional information. We're sharing the most current information that we have, as well as some really good links to the county, as well as CDC. And we are in regular contact with the 2 school districts and other local governments that have a presence here. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. All right, next up, we're going to have John Kopelman, who's speaking about the Greenway project, and then he will be followed by Blair Dominic, and then Richard Weiss, and then we've got a few more after that.
Good evening. My name is John Koppelman. I'm the president of the Delaware Neighborhood Association. I live at 5508 West 118th Place, just across the line from El Segundo. And nearly 2 weeks ago, the Delaware Neighborhood Association, the DNA, attended the MTA Board of Directors hearing and spoke about the Greenway to LA project, which is, for those that don't know, is a proposed bike path and running trail on the existing Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad property between blocks that. So it's really a route to nowhere as far as that the train goes. The MTA is very excited about this project. They really want this. Janice Hahn's office, the supervisor Janice Hahn, has been very helpful and is very energized to make this happen. We have applied for grant writing help. The grant writing assistance from the MTA, and they have a program that actually writes the grants, federal grants, for municipalities that are not real big and don't have the resources to writing a federal grant is quite a project, and we've applied on behalf of the City of El Segundo to qualify the City of El Segundo for the grant writing assistance program from the MTA. The only hitch that has happened is we need a letter of neutrality from BNSF. And BNSF, the contact person that the county used to have, retired about 2 weeks before we went into this needing a letter of neutrality from them. A letter of neutrality is simply a letter from the railroad saying that we've spoken to you guys, we know what you're doing, and we're aware of it. It doesn't say we approve of it, or we're going to give you the property, or it doesn't say anything. It just says we're aware of it, of the proposal, and it's just a letter of neutrality. Since we have not been able to get through the very insular railroad system, the MTA decided, the mayor of Los Angeles, Garcetti, has directed the director of real estate for the MTA to speak with us after the hearing, which she did. She came out and spoke to us, and she told us that because they're having this problem, the MTA decided, since the MTA actually owns the property, BNSF only owns the operating rights, that the MTA is going to write a letter of neutrality because they own the property. Essentially, they want us to qualify, they want El Segundo to qualify for the grant assistance program. And so that's where we're at. At some point in time, we are going to need to get the railroad to come forward. But it's more important at this time, since it is time sensitive, to get the city to qualify for this. We've done all the footwork. We're making this happen. We're trying to do this in a way that it doesn't bury you guys in another major project that, and we're aware that this isn't the only thing going on in the world. And so we're doing everything we can to make this as easy and seamless for the city as possible. It benefits not just El Segundo and Del Aire, it benefits the whole entire region. This is the last real link for an off-highway bike path between LAX and West LA and all the way down to Redondo Beach. It almost connects us up to the path that goes through Manhattan Beach and down through Hermosa and down to King Harbor off the road. It's an amazing bike path. The new Rams Stadium, I'm sure that people will use that bike path to ride all the way from Redondo Beach, get on their bikes and ride up to the Green Line and skip on the Green Line for just a hop up to the stadium and go to the football game on their bicycles. It's really amazing.
Mr. Copeland, I'd like to remind you that your 5 minutes is exceeded.
I don't know where my time is at. I'm sorry.
Sorry, that was on me. Sorry, Mona. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
We would like anybody that knows, has a contact with the railroad to please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Koppelman. Mr. Dominic, Blair Dominic. Again, followed by Richard Weiss.
Good evening. I moved here about 4 years ago from New York, and the reason why I moved here was because this town reminded me of my upstate New York hometown. Small town, good values, great school district. And the one thing that I've been really reading about is your affordable housing here in El Segundo. I know there's some builders building affordable housing, and it's a little disconcerting to me that people like me who make enough money to possibly buy a house here in El Segundo, or if I feel like I'm being priced out. I don't make $100,000, but I don't make $30,000 a year. And I guess my question to the city council is how are you going to sustain housing prices for people like myself who want to live here, but you're pricing me out by giving these developers criteria? I know one developer in particular, you asked for him to build some affordable housing for low income and extremely low income. Who sets that price? Do you set the price, or does your community set the price by the pricing of your real estate, or do you use the federal low income standards and extremely low income standards? And I would like to own a house here. I'd like to stay here, but it's getting to the point where rent is going up to a point where if I don't buy a house, I have to move. It's very, you're looking at a 2-bedroom apartment for $2,300 a month. You can buy a 2-bedroom house, it's almost $1 million here, and it'd be nice to have an option for someone like me or someone like in this room who would love to stay in this community and be a valued member of the community, but it's getting to the point where people like me can't stay here anymore. So who sets the standard for housing when you talk about low income and extremely low income? Is it the builder? Is it the city council? Because I've read a lot of different things, and the gentleman company that wants to build houses over off Imperial, he wants to take away housing, low income housing. He wants less. So I just would like some clarification on who's going to set those standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dominic. Okay, up next is Richard Weiss. Yeah, how are you? Good to see you, neighbor. It's been a while. And then followed by Jamin Griffiths. Did I get that right? Close?
Yes.
Oh, we met. I'm sorry. What is it again? Tell me. Jamin. Yeah, okay. Sorry, Jamin. And then Lisa Varela will be after that. Mr. Weiss.
I have the three buildings on Oregon Street where they're going to be doing the building across at on 140. And the only thing I'm concerned about is the pole line, which they have in front of my building on 125 in the middle of the sidewalk with 5 large pipes going underground. That's going to be for the high power stuff, apparently. Are they going to do away with the pole line across the street? Across from 137, that's a leased line, I understand. Is that correct?
Mr. Weiss, what we'll do is we'll get all your questions, your comment, and then I'll probably turn it over to the city attorney and city manager to answer some of your questions, okay? But if you want to just lay it all out there, all your concerns, and then we'll have them chime in, okay?
So how about the sidewalks? Are they going to redo the sidewalks in that area? Our sidewalk, once this thing is done there's no way for anybody to get by without walking into my property type of thing.
Mr. Mitnick, do you want to address any concerns you might have right now?
Is this related to the community benefits agenda item?
Yes.
Okay, can we deal with that when we get to that item, or that might be better?
Yeah, we're going to, Mr. Weiss, it might be a while because we've got a big agenda, but we're going to, there'll be an
I'm a
overview of
little
the,
hard of hearing.
there'll be an overview of that project later on in the evening, so if you want to stick around for that, it'll go into all the detail, a lot of the detail of the project, okay?
Okay.
That'll be agenda item 11, but Mashia Jennings in the back, she'll help you understand when that item's coming.
Will there be public comment for that item?
Absolutely.
Okay.
There's public comment during that. Rick, there's a,
That's a public hearing. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
so there'll be an opportunity for public comment during that hearing later tonight.
Well, I say one thing, the parking structure across the street is very, very nice. Extremely nice looking. I mean, if you can have a
I
parking structure.
I think the
that's nice.
builder might be in the audience, so I'm sure he
Nice job,
appreciates that.
Mr.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, for the public comment items, you may want to hold off on those until the public hearing, if there's a public hearing item in that stack.
Yeah, the subject wasn't clear on that
Sure,
card.
I
Thank
totally
you.
understand.
All right, gentlemen.
So items 8, 9, 10, and 11 are separate public hearings.
I think I'm safe with that one. Yeah, I just wanted to speak about the affordable housing. Saw that coming up, and my name is Jamie Griffiths, live at 123 East Oak. Been here over 10 years now.
Hold on one second. Sorry, we should defer this too. I'm sorry. We're going to have a public hearing specifically for this, okay?
For
So
that.
if you would stick around
Oh, okay.
till later,
Cool.
please. Thank you. Sorry for
mate.
that. So Lisa, that applies to you as well. Lisa, are you there? Yeah, that applies to you as well, okay, later. And let's see. Short-term rentals is a public hearing, so that will be later. Mr.
No.
Shute.
No, actually, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, short-term rentals is not a public hearing.
Oh, it's still under the public hearing heading. Okay. All right, so short-term rentals, we'll hear from Mr. Shu, and we'll hear from Mr. Heck. So, Mr. Heck first, please.
Yeah, I think he's here for the property.
Okay,
Imperial
we'll wait
540.
on that one too then. Mr. Shu, you're up.
Hi, my name is Jeff Shue. I live on 411 Concord Street, and I've been here several times on the short-term rental situation. And as I said last time, I know the arguments for and arguments against, and they're not going to change. And I know that you're trying to walk the middle line, in which case probably ultimately neither side will be happy, but that's ultimately what's going to happen. You know, I had spoken some time ago with Manhattan Beach City Council member, and as I had said at that time in front of the City Council, that they took the position that they did not want to sell their soul of the community for a few dollars. And you know, we always talk about the dollars, but El Segundo's more than a few dollars. It's a community, and it's a community of residents that have vested interest in their neighbors. And it saddens me. I've been a resident for over 25 years, and it saddens me to see the very nature of our community change, like it's going to change. You know, if I had an alligator that ventured onto my property and didn't know it and it bit somebody, well, that's one thing. But if I purposely brought an alligator into my property and it bites somebody, then I'm held accountable. You know, a lot of very negative things have happened with short-term rental property throughout the country and Canada and Europe. Allowing short-term rentals is not too far away from bringing in an alligator to our neighborhood. And, you know, maybe the alligator won't bite someone, but if it does, I hope whoever is the victim will hold the city accountable, because you are opening your arms to bringing in this alligator, and I just think it's a shame. Now, back to your proposal last time, I may have misunderstood a couple things, but I think it allowed duplexes, and I'm thinking about it, and I don't really understand the difference between a duplex and an ADU. In the proposal, the ADUs are not allowed, but yet a duplex, I understood, and I could be wrong, is allowed. Back to the gentleman in the red shirt that talked about the housing prices. Well, if you take a duplex out of the market, you're taking housing out of the market for someone who could rent this full time. You know, we do have a housing shortage, and short-term rentals do not help that situation. It doesn't help it one bit. It exasperates the rental market considerably. So that's one thing I don't understand, why a duplex is special and can be rented out. The other thing is, you know, owner occupied. If the owner does not live on the duplex, I understood he could rent one of them out, but it's still tantamount to the ADU as far as I'm concerned. So you have to kind of explain that to me, because I don't quite understand that. Personally, I would prefer to see it go to ballot, because I can tell you, for every happy host and owner, there's probably several people who are adversely affected by the short-term rental situation next to them. So personally, I would prefer it to go to referendum, but I know that won't happen. But I think what we're doing is we're accommodating a few people for the economic benefit that they receive, at the expense of the neighbors who receive nothing but headaches many times. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shu. All right, that will close public communication. As a reminder, I've got Mr. Griffiths, Ms. Varela, and Mr. Heck that will be speaking later when we get to the public hearing. City Manager, do you want to address any of the comments that were made?
On the Aviation Greenbelt Bikeway, it's a very exciting project, and we were made aware of the Del Air Association meetings. We try to attend those or be there as needed, and we're working cooperatively with Metro and other players as best we can to move that forward. There, as one of the speakers mentioned, there is an application in front of Metro, so it's a wait and see right now. But we're happy to follow up with Del Air Association and anybody else. Also, there are some adjacent property owners who have expressed an interest in being involved in this process. They find it to be potentially beneficial to their development. With respect to how standards and criteria are set for affordable housing units, that will be discussed, I believe, in a little bit on one of the public hearing items. But that sort of begs the question and adds support to having a affordable housing entity that we're part of, so we can hammer out those type of issues in the future. And if any of these speakers have any further questions, staff would be glad to take their name and then meet with them at a later time. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Mitnick. All right, we are going to move up items 13 and 14. And 13 is appointment to the Arts and Culture Advisory Committee, and 14 is update from the IS Department and the Technology Committee. So Arts and Culture, we have exciting news. We had Chris, you're the liaison, right, for arts and culture? How many
That's
candidates
correct.
did we have for that?
5 for 1 spot.
5 for 1 spot. So that's a great problem to have. And Chris, you want to make the announcement since you're the liaison?
No, please go ahead, actually.
Okay.
I'm locked up on my form right here. Hold on.
Oh, yeah, no worries. All right, so we are going to be appointing Samantha Smith-Strasser to the Arts and Culture Advisory Committee, and her term will expire June 30th, 2020. So congratulations. We look forward to working with you. All right, next up, we have the update from the IS Department, the Technology Committee. While that's coming up, thank you for volunteering your time. Both of you, Chad, Madeline, it's much appreciated.
Thanks so much. Thanks very much for having us here to talk. We hope this will be really fast, but we thought it was a good time to give council an update on really what is 2 topics here, but it's kind of celebrating our successes, sharing what we've been doing. So I'm Madeline Smith, and Chad Hahn.
You guys don't know me, do you?
This is Chad Hahn, and we are from the Technology Committee, and actually we have another member of our committee here with us today. And the, let me see. Okay, got it. What we wanted to share with council is a couple of slides about the committee's work, and then we transition to a couple of slides about the departmental work. And Charles is sorry that he can't be here today, but Charles Mallory is our director of the IS department, and had intended to be here to speak to that also. But starting with the committee side, for those who are new to council or didn't know this, the committee was created as a citizen volunteer committee. It was originally established through discussions in 2016, and it took a little while to formalize itself, and finally got going. And the first job of any committee is, unfortunately, the housekeeping part and administrative part of setting up the committee itself. So establishing bylaws, deciding what the purpose is, getting input from city attorney to make sure that the bylaws are correct and make sense, and the function of the committee. So that work was all done, and was not a small amount of work. So we want to celebrate that success. Moving from that, directly related to that, our bylaws require that we create for the city a technology and software selection process. The reason that that was part of this committee was because at the time that this was all begun, there was no IS department, formal IS department with a formal director. So the city's technology needs were being met in a slightly less structured way, and this committee's main purpose originally was to design a process to sort of make that a little bit more controlled and itemized. A main output of that is an RFP template, so that when we go out as a city and talk to people about systems that we may be acquiring, that we're all speaking from the same book. The other big piece of it is the ongoing project management oversight process, which was, again, it's kind of a housekeeping thing, but being sure that organizationally, the City of El Segundo has templates for project charters, for structure, for project management, change requests. And although all of these sound very bureaucratic, the important thing here is that this is not a small amount of money that the city has to spend in technology, and technology moves very rapidly, and we don't want to be haphazard about it. So all of these pieces of foundational work that the committee has done, super boring, but super important. But then we did also some, we think, fun stuff, which is what Chad gets to talk about.
Well, I think many members of the council were at the visioning workshop that we did. This was back roughly a year and a half ago now, I think. I believe it was in August of 2018 or sometime around then. Part of what we wanted to do as a technology committee, in addition to setting some foundation, is set some sort of a vision. Think 10 to 15 years into the future and say, what do we want technology in the city of El Segundo to be at that point? That becomes our vision. So we had a facilitation exercise. We came up with an overall vision that had very key elements, right? I think you remember data, human resources, virtual town hall, those sorts of aspects. And that got translated by Charles and the IS department into foundational strategies, which you see here. And the very important key is, moving forward, everything that's done from a year-to-year basis needs to map back to the overall vision. So having this in place was very helpful, and it was another foundational piece we wanted to put into place.
Exactly right. And so having this vision and these foundational ideas help us with the number one item here, which is on an ongoing basis, what the committee is charged with doing is it's providing a way for there to be citizen input into what the city is doing with regard to technology and these priorities, and this process of annually going through the priorities come out of the IS department. That's their job, to gather all the needs and to prioritize them. But our job is to look at those and say, hey, here's our thoughts, here's some input, here's some discussion around that, and tying it back to those strategies, those foundational strategies, so that every project the city is doing fits into something that the city said they wanted to be able to do strategically. The other thing this committee was part of, I was not, but it was before my time in its original version, was in fact setting up that IS department, recruiting an IS director. They were part of the interview process for that and the selection process. So it was very exciting to have been able to have accomplished that. And then finally, we have a couple of very large investment projects that we're very proud of, which transitions right into the next slide that would have had Charles here, which is the departmental accomplishments. So these were all things the committee did. And now we have completions. I've only gone back a couple of years on completions because this really starts with Charles's tenure here. But some of the main things that we've done, these are really highlights. People who have used any of these will recognize these, but the internet workstations for the library, Rec 1, people using the parks system, cashiering system for finance, payment gateway for finance, able to move the email archive and public record, complying with the Records Act, cameras for PD. There's a PD implementation piece of that that's not quite all the way through, but the camera portion of it and the IS evaluation portion of that is done. The pre-alert system for fire department. There's a big fiber installation and implementation, particularly with regard to the new aquatics center. We've moved phase 1 of cloud-based email, and when I say we, really it's the IS department. It's not the technology committee. This is really Charles's slide. Records management system upgrade, Lexipol system, and the website that our city manager was just referencing. We're extremely proud of the very cool new website for the city, and in particular that it dovetails and connects to communications pieces. So for example, the Gov delivery, if you signed up and you get regular newsletters from the city or statements from the city, Gov access, so that you can do a lot of that virtual city hall concept that we've been talking about. So these completions really important. There's still a big long list, but we're very proud of what the department has been able to accomplish and that work. So where we're headed, Chad?
Yeah, so we're pretty excited about where we're going with things. We've got a vision in place, we've got foundation in place. One of the next priorities for us is to take the priority list that exists today of technology projects, as well as new priorities that will come up when Charles, the IS director, works with all the departments, and map those back to the overall strategies to align to the vision. So that way the committee can provide some input on any reprioritization that may need to take place based on those strategies. So that's something that's going to be happening in the next couple of months. Another key aspect of what we want to do is really start to become more data-driven. So we've had some initial conversations with Meredith and her team at the Parks and Rec Department around quick win ways to hopefully increase engagement in classrooms by looking at past data. And we'll use emerging technology and machine learning if it makes sense. We'll do regular analytics for that if it makes sense. But we want to try to get some sort of quick win on the data side and see if that can scale. So that's something we'll work with the IS department on. I think most importantly, we just want to build on some momentum that we think has been achieved through the past accomplishments, in particular the website. That website made a big difference, and we think it's going to have a big impact. And we have a really strong relationship with the IS department. It's very collaborative, and with that collaboration, we think that we'll be able to achieve some really interesting things, particularly on the data front. So we're excited about where things are going, and we wanted the council to know kind of what's happened in the past and what we're looking for in the future.
And our last slide here is because nothing can be done without volunteers and without the great work of so many different people. So as I started this presentation with, the committee was started several years ago, and there's already been a turnover and a transition of the membership on this committee. But every person that's on this list, and it's not in chronological order, it's in alpha order by last name, but we just want to thank so many people who worked really hard, gave a lot of hours. It's all volunteer, and ground through whether it was all of that boring but important back-end stuff or the visioning work or the now going forward. It's exciting to see so much engagement, and we really thank all the people who've worked really hard to help El Segundo move forward in technology. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. And I just want to acknowledge Mr. Scott Kim too, because he's been here for the distance, and it was a ton of work. Thank you for being here, and thank you for all your hard work, and thank you for volunteering your time. Carol, you're the liaison, right?
Yeah, I just want to thank you both and thank the team. We started this, Drew and I, when we first got elected 4 years ago. We recognized that we really needed to bring in expertise from the community to help us and help the city grow in the technology arena. And this team has really helped us, and just seeing that the list of projects being completed is amazing. And I know there's a lot on the horizon. I just heard this last week from the city manager that we also implemented a time and attendance for our Park and Recs department. So things like that is really going to help us be more efficient, streamline our operations, and we can't thank the community enough for volunteering and giving us that insight and guidance.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, next up, consideration of a motion to read all ordinances and resolutions on the agenda by title only.
So moved.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 4-0. All right, consent calendar, do we have any polls? Going once, going twice.
I'll move to approve the consent calendar.
All right, I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Next up, public hearings. Item 8. Give me a second here.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I am choosing to recuse myself from this item, based upon the potential perception of a conflict of interest, and just in my goal for keeping a very clean and clear public hearing, I'm going to recuse myself.
Thank you, Councilman Nichol. All right, here we go. This is the time and place hereto fixed for a public hearing. Amend 540 East Imperial Avenue Specific Plan, Second Amendment to Development Agreement Number DA 16-01, and an amended condition of approval to allow developer DR Horton CA2 Incorporated to pay a fee of $5.3 million to City of El Segundo for affordable housing purposes in lieu of affordable housing requirement. The applicant is DR Horton CA2 Incorporated. City Clerk, was proper notice of the hearing given in a timely manner?
Yes.
Thank you. Has any written communication been received regarding this public hearing?
DR Horton, we received 2.
Thank you. All right, public hearing is now open. Mr. Mitnick, who will make the presentation. And after the presentation, we'll allow those people that filled out these cards to speak. And if you haven't done so and you still want to speak about this or like to speak about this issue, please get them in Demona right away.
Craig McLean, our planning manager, will give the presentation. Also, by way of reference, if need be, we do have our consultant here from Kaiser Marston. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, City Council, Mayor Pro Tem. This is about Waypoint Affordable Housing. As you know, the original affordable housing agreement called for 2 low-income units, 2 very low-income units, and 2 extremely low-income units. And there was a proposal last summer in July, or June and July, where DR Horton came up with an alternative, which was 8 moderate income units. That was that came to this body. It was introduced, but no action was taken, so it sort of died from lack of action. And so we're back to the original proposal. It's still an option, 222, I'll call it. But now there's another alternative, and that is $5.3 million to use for affordable housing purposes in lieu of providing affordable housing units at the property. So I want to talk a little bit about the challenges of the original agreement. These are challenges that have been studied by our consultants and confirmed. The very low and the extremely low income residents, if they were to be put in there, because these are ownership units as opposed to rental units, will not be able to afford that. The units will be given to them practically free, if not free, but the costs of living there, including the HOA fees, will make it untenable for them. So it's quite possible, very likely, that they'll be worse off for it in the long run. all the units are income restricted for 20 years, so unless they can manage to stay there for 20 years, they will not experience any benefit from equity growth, which will probably make them very mad when they try to sell, at some point between now and 20 years. And lastly, the city would be administering this program, and we have no expertise in that as it stands right now. There are challenges to taking the 5.3 million for us. There is a law known as the No Net Loss Law, and it was amended in 2017 to become a little bit harder for us. That would require the city to amend its housing element to find some place in the city to put 2 very low, 2 extremely low, and 2 low-income units. And that's extremely hard to do, okay? We would be given about 180 days to do that after the ordinances become effective. However, we feel that with $5.3 million and a plan to put that money to an affordable housing fund, and previously you had approved the RFQ to find an affordable housing partner for the city, we think that this might help to make the case before the state that we're not just ignoring our obligations. We're actually setting the groundwork to do the right thing. It's just it can't be done in 180 days, but we will be doing the right thing. So this is the plan. We're going to take the 5.3 million if you approve this, and it will be earmarked for affordable housing fund. It will not be possible to take that money and borrow from it or put it into the general fund or to use it for any other purpose except for affordable housing. Meanwhile, the RFQ has been approved, so we'll start an RFQ for Affordable Housing Services Partner. That'll take a couple of weeks. Then we'll select the Affordable Housing Services Partner. And then together, we'll develop the city's first affordable housing plan. The city has never had an affordable housing plan. We've never been a part of a redevelopment agency. We've never had one, I mean. Never had any interest in affordable housing by all appearances. This will change now because we recognize it's an urgent need now. We'll be collecting funds from other projects possibly, and then we'll be combining those funds in the Affordable Housing Fund. We'll accumulate more, hopefully soon, and leverage those funds to attract housing tax credits and other opportunities that are out there. And hopefully our partner will be more of an expert in that than we are. The housing partner then acquires, builds, or rehabs, and manages the units for the city. So, in the long run, more families will be helped, but we're talking long run, and it will be an ongoing program. So, as it builds momentum and the funds grow and grow, we continue to help families who are low income, very low income, and extremely low income. And we can help moderate income as well. It will help us to make significant progress toward our RHNA number. And as you know, the next cycle's RHNA number will be in the hundreds. It won't be in the tens. Also, it shows the city's resolve to address affordability. I think this is very important. There are some other benefits that Mr. King would like to address.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, as part of this project, the proposed ordinance in front of you would resolve litigation that was brought by DR Horton. DR Horton sued the city as an outgrowth of what happened at the July 2019 City Council meeting. So as part of this proposal in front of you, the ordinance would authorize the city manager to enter into a settle agreement with DR Horton, and the city would not, none of these approvals that staff is referring to would take effect until DR Horton has settled that lawsuit. And then as part of the project as well, in the amendment to the development agreement that's in front of you, once the city receives the $5.3 million for its affordable housing program, at that point, the market rate units that are currently tied up as leverage for the affordable units could then be completed. So the city would then, as part of the documents, the city would agree to issue certificates of occupancy for the market rate units that DR Horton has sold that are currently pending escrow as we resolve this issue. So that would resolve the market rate units as well.
So if you have any questions of us, and we also have our consultants from Kaiser Marston and Cosmont companies here, that if you have questions about an affordable housing program, they will be helping us with the RFQ, and they're experts on that sort of thing. So they'd be the right ones to ask.
Thank you. I think there are a couple. Just David, real quick, on any legal opinion on the no new net loss?
Right.
Net loss?
So as Planning Manager McLean mentioned, that is a new law that took effect after the project approval. The no net loss law does require the city to, I actually looked up the wording. It says identify and make available sites of an equivalent nature with 180 days of the action. So if the council approves this action, our office would work with the planning department and we'll do our very best to meet that 180 days deadline. But the idea is that in 2017, the state changed its rules so that if we take away affordable units from the property, the city must now find replacement units somewhere else within 180 days.
And what's at stake?
Possibly some sort of enforcement action from the state. There isn't a specific penalty listed in the law that I can tell, but HCD, the state, could we don't want them to focus too much attention on our program. So if they find that we're not in compliance with 180 days, they may audit us, maybe, make our lives very difficult as far as housing issues. So we need to do our very, very best to meet that deadline.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to my colleagues.
What happened to the option with the moderate housing? I think we thought we were going to have that as a third option. The singular flaw of that was the dual lottery system, not necessarily any sort of the feasibility. And is that not one of our options here?
No, I apologize. That's still an option. It was rejected by the no action taken last time, so I didn't include it in my presentation, but it's an available option.
Is that option been modified to those lotteries? Because one of the exposures that we pointed out was by having that singular active duty military carve out, that would create once that person, a service member who has it, PCSs and moves out of here, then we would never be able to ask them to change that. They would have a USERRA claim and it would become a de facto rental property for the next 17 years. Has that been modified in that third option?
I'm not much of an expert on that.
The option that's been presented by DR Horton, as part of this application, there were two options. One was the 5.3 million and the other was the 8 moderate units. The active military status was something that came up in prior councils. So that's definitely something that staff could take a look at if the city council wants to pursue the 8 moderate unit option. The staff at this point is only supporting the $5.3 million option. So that's the only ordinance and resolution that's been presented to council for tonight.
And that was the Planning Commission recommendation.
I mean, that's surprising that other option is not mooted here this evening.
But if I can interject, that is an option for the council. We'd have to go back and revise the ordinance. So if the council desires to do that, that's your prerogative. I'm sorry if that was not clear.
A question, this may be on the affordable piece. Do we have a sense on, a number of them, we cite that we would look to leverage funds from other projects. Can you elaborate on what those funding sources would be?
Yeah, if other projects are going to be for sale projects, and that we would not want those to be, affordable, basically getting into the same problem that we're having with this project, where they're not going to be viable for the people to own. We would ask for, or we would negotiate through a development agreement, a contribution to this fund.
Okay.
On the other hand, if somebody was developing a for rent project, we would rather have the units, and we'll negotiate for units.
Oh, so that would be, okay, so part of a specific development agreement, we would ask for either an in lieu funding or units.
Yeah, any project that has a development agreement, certainly, and possibly we might come up with other mechanisms. This will all be hashed out when we develop a affordable housing plan.
And do we have any sense, and some of this is a bit, I'm asking a crystal ball question, if we went with the in lieu payment, what is the timeline? When does someone put their key in the lock to their home if we do that? Is that 24 months, 18 months, 36 months?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we don't have a crystal ball, but we believe, and our consultant is here too, because Kathy Head with Kaiser Marston. We believe if everything goes right and we stay laser focused and we get the affordable housing entity on board, we could do that within 2 years. That would be reasonable to expect we could see that, but there is no guarantee. And just to be clear, you are taking a leap of faith that we will be able to deliver in this, but this is routinely done in California municipalities. Where it's the level of angst for the council and the community is we have not had a housing authority here before. We have not done that. The city did build a 96-unit low-income senior housing project through its general fund, and we managed that, but we haven't done the traditional approach. This would allow you to take advantage of the traditional approach. And yeah, there's a leap of faith, and you'll hold your city manager and staff accountable if we're not able to deliver that. And if Kathy, if you would like our consultant to give you more clarity on that, we could do that.
No, I don't want the line of questioning to cast aspersions on the faith we put on the staff to be able to execute things.
Yeah.
I mean, I think demonstrably, we just had the tech committee up here talking about the website. That
Yeah.
is case in point that things happen here and happen on schedule and happen with a degree of rigor that I think is impressive. So I don't want this to be seen as
Oh, no, no.
an indictment of that at all.
Yeah.
I would ask, if it's 5.3 million, and let's say we aren't able to leverage other funding sources, do we have a sense of what the unit, what our this may be a question for Ms. Marston about what we think our unit count would be?
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name's Kathy Head, and I'm from Kaiser
Excuse me.
Marston.
Pardon me.
That's all right. I answered almost anything. The answer, if you only had the 5.3 million, is you'd probably end up with about 12 rental units, as opposed to the 8 or the 6 that you'd been talking about. I think that, I mean, Craig mentioned it and discussed it very thoroughly. The 6 as programmed were basically infeasible, not even basically, they were infeasible. The 8 moderate could be made to work, but then what happens with the 8 moderate is that after 20 years, you don't have the affordable units anymore. And so they're gone from your inventory and you're back in the same place trying to replace them. If you do them as rental units, they'll have a much longer covenant period. People move in, people move out. They're not expecting equity appreciation. So you don't have that same problem when somebody goes to resell where they say, oh, wait, what do you mean I can't make money when I go to sell it? So I think that's, and with a rental project, you have one owner, one manager, so everything's maintained at the same quality level. Whereas if you have 8 different owners, then they're all in different financial straits. Different things are affordable. If you get a capital need, you know, different people will have different ability. So it's just, in my opinion, my professional opinion, I think rental is a more stable way to produce affordable housing of this type.
Yeah, I would say, without going to our deliberative part, I guess my next question would be, at the 20-year mark, when those cease to become qualified properties, does no net loss mean that we would have to go back, we would effectively be in an 8-unit deficit or a 6-unit deficit at the 20-year mark, that we would have to replace those units?
No, the no net loss would mean that we have to find replacement housing somewhere else. By then, 20 years from now, our arena numbers are going to be different than they are now. So, if we take the in lieu fee, we'll have to find the unit somewhere else. But if the units stay where they're at, the no net loss would not apply to that right now. Yeah, those would be affordable for the 20-year period, and we wouldn't have to find replacement at that point.
And I hate to throw out another crystal ball question, because I know I'm asking you to define the future. But in the near future, when obviously the Cowboys are winning Super Bowls and I have hair, and my robot friends are telling me I'm funny, my question would be, do we anticipate these units, would we be purchasing a building and we would have a concentration of affordable units in one location? Or are these typically, we are purchasing sites dispersed within other buildings, and that becomes an affordable unit in building X and in building Y and in building Z?
The former.
The former, so it'd be a concentrated
It would be
property.
concentrated, in this instance, probably plus or minus 12-unit project.
Okay.
Carol?
I was just wanted to follow up on the 180 days. If you could just explain that a little bit and what our requirement is on that?
Yes, absolutely. So the state laws, it just says that if an affordable housing project later is revised to remove certain affordable units, the state law says within 180 days, the city has to identify and make available sites that are equivalent to what's being removed from a project. So if city council approves the in lieu fee, that means that the 222 that are currently at the project, planning staff, our office, will work together to figure out where we can identify within the city some other sites that can accommodate those units. And the state law says that process has to be finished within 180 days. So likely something would come back to the city council, hopefully within that time period.
So what I'm concerned about is we are also saying that it's going to take about 2 years to get this affordable housing done for the 5.3 million. So what's the interim to satisfy the 180 days? Like how are you going to find that? And does it have to be, because right now we're taking for sale property off.
Right, it's good faith.
Does it have to be for sale as well, or can it
No.
be rental?
It could be rental.
It could be
Greg,
rental.
Okay.
And
And how would you accommodate that? I'm still,
all we would have to do is amend our housing element. At the back of the housing element is an inventory of available sites. So we would have to find the sites, put them in that inventory, and then HCD will review that to make sure that they're viable, that they're not just made up. So they would check them for the zone, they would check them for the area, they would check our zoning code to make sure that they can be built to that density and so forth. And then we would take the other ones off. That's what we'd have to do. So it's basically a housing element update.
so it's not necessarily you have to say, here's the keys to
No,
those.
no.
It's just, this is the property that's going to be being built, or it's in
Yeah.
the planning stage.
We have to
Right.
replace them on the list, essentially.
I see.
And the reason for that, so the council understands, is that we relied on the project in our current housing element. So we told the state, we are going to have affordable units at this project. Look at 540 Imperial Avenue. And then if you take those units away, then you have to tell the state, okay, now we're going to replace them over here. So as the planning manager mentioned, we don't have to build the units. We just have to identify them and say, here they are, as part of our new housing element.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, along with explaining to the state exactly what we're doing with the $5.3 million and the good faith effort to produce more units. So they'll work with us. Where they would really frown on us and be upset if we just said, do a market rate project, there'll be no money set aside for affordable housing.
I have a question for the consultant, Kathy. Recently, I learned that the League of Cities approached Gavin Newsom and said, you know, enough's enough. There are 100 housing bills or whatever, and we need these guidelines, one of which was funding for new housing. You know, there can no longer be unfunded mandates top-down with severe penalties. I'd just like to get your take on where that might be headed, because certainly that could help us if there's funds in the future.
Sure. I'll answer the second question first, and then the first question second. So the funding sources, the state is continually coming up with more and more funding sources in the last few years, but they're very heavily targeted to chronically homeless. And so for the purposes of just what we call regular old affordable housing, the sources really haven't been increased in a post-redevelopment world. They've really diminished. So the unfunded mandate question is really legitimate. And Scott Wiener's bill, which recently was voted down at the state, mainly by Southern California entities, I think was a little bit of a turning point, although I would expect that bill back again next year. It's been there for the last 2 years before this, so they're going to keep tweaking it until they can get it passed. But right now, the Southern California entities made a real strong point at the state. So I think that did put the brakes on it a little bit. But the situation is everybody's RENA's coming out, and those RENA numbers are already basically estimated. And to use the technical term, they're ginormous for everybody. And what's happened with RENA in the last couple of years is rather than being a goal, it's now more prescriptive. I think what I've recommended to all my clients, not just here, is make a good faith effort to try and achieve it. Almost no one's going to be able to achieve these numbers, even the cities that have a lot of money to do affordable housing, because the numbers are just lunacy in terms of being actually as a practical matter to produce them. But then I have some clients who say, well, great, then I'm just not going to try. I think that's a bad approach. I think the approach is do what you can, make a good faith effort, you know, keep in touch with the state, have your housing element continue to be, you know, certified, et cetera, and you won't, I believe you won't be the people they come after.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Sure. Any other questions for staff before we hear from the public? Okay. Public hearing is now open for public input.
And Mr.
yes.
Mayor, I don't know if you were going to call, but usually the applicant has the first right.
Yeah, and they are here. So please, if you'd like to come up and speak, thank you.
Honorable Mayor Boyles and City Council members, I'm Mary Ann Adriatico, Vice President, Division Counsel for DR Horton, Southern California. I'll keep this brief, as staff has done a great job putting together a very thorough and comprehensive staff report and presentation to the council tonight, so thank you. Plus, I feel that we've been at this for 2+ years, and we've been working on the affordable housing component of our project. And at this point, everyone involved at the city has become pretty familiar with the history, the hurdles, and the various iterations that we at Horton and the city have worked through to come to the proposed affordable housing program that is being presented to the council tonight for its consideration. The applicant agrees with staff that the option for the in lieu fee expands the range and number of choices to provide affordable housing to those in need in the city, and we fully support a path forward for the affordable housing component of our project based on that option. I, along with Kelty Cole, who's the city manager for our Los Angeles Ventura division, are available here tonight to answer any additional questions that the council may have. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We're going to have public comments, and we'll do them in this order. Jamin Griffiths, Lisa Varela, Alex Heck, and Nancy Cobb. I believe that's it. If anyone else would like to speak on this matter, I think that's it. Okay. So, Jamin, you're up, please.
Good to see you again. Been a while. All right, that was a lot to absorb. I appreciate you guys tackling housing affordability. Like, I know when I spoke with you, Pim, a couple years ago when you were running, Mr. Pimentel, councilman, that that was one of the things that, you know, was important to me is that, you know, all of us here love our city. I would like to see it remain more economically diverse, as many cities in the, you know, California have struggled with affordable housing issues. I think we've seen the complexion of the city change over the past decade, and a lot of people who would like to remain here haven't been able to remain here. And, you know, the last, like I think you mentioned, 30 years ago, I think was the last time this city actually tackled anything admirably by, you know, putting seniors into housing. But I think after reviewing this, you know, honestly, I think it's an interesting way to go, but I don't know, I'm not, after seeing this and not knowing all the information like you guys do, I have hesitations regarding the funding that's going to come, you know, like a leap of faith. There's a lot of projects around town that can't seem to find the funding. You have budget shortfalls that you can, you know, that you guys have been touting for multiple years that you've been trying to fix. And, you know, 9 times out of 10, I agree with like all the decisions that you guys have been making on our behalf. So I think the citizens have done a pretty good job of voting you guys in and looking after the best interests. However, the one thing that does stick out to me is, like, I find it fairly disingenuous that DR Horton entered into this agreement without knowing what the outcome probably would have been when this affordable housing portion of their agreement was made. Like, they're not new to this. They would have known that there would have been struggles with some of the people. So if it's untenable for the extremely low and low income to get in there, You know, I don't know, but I would have a good idea that somebody at DR Horton would say, you probably aren't going to be able to do this, so we're going to come back to the table some other time, and we're going to renegotiate it, most likely in our favor. 5.3 is nothing to sniff your nose up at. I get it. But it seems to me that it could be planned out a little bit more. Maybe this will be the way. I would think a more thought out strategy for the funding would be good before you agree on letting DR Horton out of their obligations so they can wipe their hands and then go make X amount millions more on Waypoint. And, you know, for me, I think I do put a lot of faith and trust in your guys' judgment, but I would ask you to just take a longer look at what this is going to be for the long term. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Griffiths. All right, Ms. Varela.
Hello, Mayor, City Council. My name is Lisa Varela. I'm a resident of El Segundo for 6 years. I'm also a Marine veteran, and I'm here to speak about the affordable housing thing that I read about last year as well. There's a couple of things. First of all, the original proposal obviously is not feasible. So they put the other one for the 8 moderate in there, which could work. The first thing I want to say is that at the last meeting I came to, there was a concerted effort to continue to omit the 8 affordable housing and go in lieu. And I don't think that's right, number one. And then it was always like, oh, okay, well, if we need to add it back in because you'd like us to do that, then we'll do that. So I think right there, that's not good. The second thing is, the RENA numbers are there. They're not going to change. There was a gentleman that came to the last meeting and had done some research on different cities that have these RENA numbers. And from his information, those cities haven't even been cited or anything on those RENA numbers yet. So the other gentleman that came and spoke about the virus, about how we shouldn't panic and we should get ready like we normally do, I think we should do the same thing in regards to the RENA numbers. Do our concerted effort and do what we're supposed to do to get there. The 8 units, the 6 units, you say it's going to be 180 days, but then you're saying that it's going to take 24 months. So what is it, 180 or 24 months? So that doesn't really jive also. The other thing is, just coming here was my second time. I've learned so much about being involved in the community. It's amazing. I mean, and then for those people that did the website, those are volunteers that live in the community. Most of those people probably live here, have lived here a long time. They're involved in their community, and most of them probably own their homes. For the 8 units for moderate housing, all we've ever talked about in these meetings is how they won't work. We come up with studies about why they won't work. No one's ever talked about why they will work. Most people that live in homes that they grew up in, there's a sense of pride and ownership that comes with owning a home. When I'm renting, most people don't care. It's not their property. They don't care about it. But when they own it, they have a sense of pride in that. They give that to their children. So their children learn about upward mobility. We don't want people just living somewhere. We want them to be part of the community. We want them to have a sense of pride in where they live. We want their children to go to the schools. El Segundo is one of the best school districts around. I know so many people that would love to have their kids come here and grow up here and be part of the community and own a home and teach their children how to own their home too. Most of you guys have probably learned that from your families, but a lot of people don't get a chance and an opportunity to do that. And this will give that to them. And this won't come along again in El Segundo. And it won't.
You can build all these housing units and put all these rentals, which you're going to have to do anyway, but you'll never have this opportunity to help 8 families. 8 families, 2 adults, 2 children. That's 16 people who are going to learn how to have economic growth and opportunity. That's not going to happen in a rental. It just won't. And you're going to have to come up with the way to make these units happen anyway. So 5.3 million, you said how many units? 12. So what are we doing? 4 more people in rentals? What are we teaching? We're not teaching anything with that. We're not helping the community. We're not having people grow and learn together on how to build a good life for themselves. And after that 20 years that we're talking about, 20 years is such a long time and a short time. So many things can happen. But within that 20 years, you're providing opportunity, you're providing pride, growth, anything that we all want in living in this society. Thank you for this opportunity, and for those tech people, you guys are awesome.
Thank you, Ms. Varela. Mr. Heck.
Good evening, Mayor Boyles, council members. Thank you for your service. My name is Alex Heck, and I live at 412 Sierra. I'm a lifelong El Segundo resident, and I teach 5th grade at Center Street Elementary. My wife, another lifelong resident, raises our 2 young children at home. And to be perfectly transparent, I'm not even sure that our family qualifies under moderate income. But if we were all to close our eyes just for a moment and picture the American dream, I'd imagine that each of us would have some version of a home in it. Tonight's decision strikes at the core of what so many of us strive for, a home. My concerns with accepting an in lieu fee at Waypoint are threefold. The plan to accept the $5.3 million lacks specifics, it lacks a very clear timeline, and it puts existing renters at risk for eviction. My understanding is that if you accept the in lieu fee, the city will then use those funds to acquire existing apartment buildings targeting low and very low income households. My concern is that $5.3 million will not buy you a big enough building to significantly increase our affordable housing lot. Waypoint has 8 homes available today. Will 5.3 be enough to produce significantly more than 8? If not, why wait? My understanding is that affordable housing projects require size. They require economies of scale to secure competitive tax credits and housing bonds that help make these types of projects successful. As construction costs continue to skyrocket, will $5.3 million in 1 year, 2 years, 5 years really develop more homes than the 8 currently available? And arguably most concerning at the human level is what happens to current tenants once the city purchases the apartment building. How many existing families will be evicted in the process of creating new rentals? For years, the city has fallen woefully short of its RENA numbers. Now we have 8 units available for the veterans who fought for our freedom, for the first responders who stand ready for the call, for our educators who teach our children. For decades, they and countless others, other hardworking individuals, have watched as the dream of homeownership slips away. These are good people who are paying more in rent than they will for their mortgage. Many are rent burdened, and some are traveling and taking time away from their families to commute hours to and from town. These are smart people who, despite what one city official alluded to, will willfully understand and the restricted covenants that they sign. In fact, to assume that by accepting the in lieu fee, the city is somehow sparing potential homeowners from making a mistake out of their own ignorance is dismissive and it's insulting. Our housing needs are not going away, regardless of your decision tonight. But don't kick this can any further down the road. We have homes ready today, homes that won't displace a single El Segundo family. Selling the Waypoint homes at 8 to 8 moderate families will be an important and albeit small step to showing the city and the state that we are committed to long-term creative solutions that this housing crisis will require. Now, some may argue the city shouldn't be involved, that we should let the free hand of the market decide, we shouldn't be picking winners and losers, but regardless of which path you choose today, we're talking about affordable housing. right? And inherently, the government's going to be involved. The question today is, are we going to will this council hold the people who promised to sell units to families of moderate or below incomes accountable? Or are we going to let them off the hook and trust that our local government officials have a better plan to help substantially more people by accepting the in lieu fee? Assuming the $5.3 million will benefit significantly more moderate income families, the city deserves to hear answers tonight to 3 simple questions. How is this going to be done? When exactly is this going to be done? And if your solution involves purchasing and renovating apartment buildings, we ought to know how many current renters will be evicted in the process. Without clear answers to those 3 questions, DR Horton ought to sell those 8 Waypoint homes to the qualified individuals they were originally intended for. As always, thank you for your time and dedication to our city.
Thank you, Mr. Hook. Ms. Nancy Cobb.
Mayor, City Council, thank you. I'm here tonight to speak in favor of accepting the offer for the 8 moderately priced units. I feel like you're inches from a touchdown here. And I also feel like there was a commitment made to the community. I was present the night of the auction, and we were thrilled that we sold that property for $22.6 million. We were thrilled when we saw all of those units going up. We were thrilled when we had the discussions that finally we would have some low-income housing. And we understand now that what low and extremely low means. But still, we have a lot of people in the community who could qualify for moderate affordable housing. And it was kind of a surprise to me to find out that many of the job classifications that I was familiar with are now considered to be in that moderate affordable category, that they actually qualify for a lot of what we previously thought of as low-income housing. I am a resident for the last, since 1976. I own a home and I also own rental properties, so I have been renting property for almost that entire time. I've dealt with lots of renters. I felt a little bit insulted about the possibility that some of these purchasers wouldn't take care of their property, because I want you to visualize who the purchasers might be. I didn't have the time to get some of the information to find out what the salary levels are of civil servants in most categories, but I could find those in education. And I found that 75% of teachers in the state of California qualify for moderate affordable housing. And I also found, I do know what the salaries are in El Segundo. A beginning teacher on the 2018-19 schedule, this is published, it's public, but a beginning teacher on step 1 could make $45,920. My experience has been that teachers are very responsible people, that even though they might be, at this point, they qualify for low income, but my experience has been that they are responsible, they're well educated, and they have career potential, that they're going to make more money each year as they progress on the salary schedule. So these aren't people who are hanging on by their fingernails. It's very difficult in the early years, but they do have a good career path ahead of them. And I have a feeling that that's true of most of your city workers as well. So as they progress, if that teacher has a bachelor's degree and then must, within a very short period of time, get a credential. If the first year they have the credential, if they're hired in then, they can make $52,000 a year. Now, once they've taught for, let's say, 5 years, teacher salary, let's say for 5 years, and they've got a master's degree now. Okay, they're all the way up to 68,000. If they want to get over to that 81,000, I believe, is probably the figure or close to it in this area, well, they have to have taught for 10 years. And they have a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and units past that. Now, they can continue. The highest paid teachers in the state are making right around $100,000. So they have a very predictable income. Folks, if their house needs to be painted, they're going to paint it. I think that the categories that we're looking at for moderate income housing are like teachers. They work for the city. They're vets. And these are people who are so extremely valuable to our community. I did ask the question, how much do you have to make to qualify for the lowest price house in El Segundo? And I don't have an answer to that, and I did arrive late tonight. I apologize. But home ownership in the United States has declined for 10 straight years. And it's considered at this point, it's 64.5%. But in El Segundo, it's 44.6%. So we're already
I'd like to
in a
make
situation.
note that the 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. That's
Thank
it.
you, Ms. Cobb. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. May I have a motion to close the public hearing? Can you fill one of these cards out real quick, please? Right there.
I just wanted to repeat something I heard at the Planning Commission meeting 2 weeks ago.
Could you please state your name?
My name is Trevor Jones.
Thank you.
I was a resident of El Segundo in the past. At the Planning Commission meeting in regards to the 8-unit plan, that does not, and the professionals can correct me if I'm wrong, that does not remove the net loss requirement. You can't replace 2 very low income with 2 moderate income homes, right? So you still have that 180-day requirement. I don't think anybody said that here today. So just want to make sure that is said. Scott just said it's correct. So that was it. Also at the Planning Commission meeting, if you haven't had a chance to rewatch the video, both Scott and the consultant, super knowledgeable on this topic. They've obviously spent a lot of time thinking about it. They both advocated for the $5.3 million, so I think we shouldn't discount their professional opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Oh, we got one more. Thank you, Mona. Mr. Heschler, Jay Heschler.
Hi, City Council. Jay Heschler, El Segundo resident. I'm also a Planning Commissioner member, but I'm not here representing the Planning Commission. I'm here for with my own personal experience on affordable housing. Every story you heard tonight, I agree with. I mean, it's heartfelt. I believe it's our American birthright to own a home. The RENA numbers are, I think, scary. You know, we've got upwards of 500 units that we've got to fulfill. I'm also a member of the Urban Land Institute, where it's a think tank that studies lots of different urban and residential issues. Every successful city, every successful affordable housing project has been all about rentals. I toured a big project in Nashville. They tried for sale for a while, and it just didn't work. There are lots of issues with for sale affordability, and so when we look at trying to fulfill these big numbers for RENA, I feel rental is about the only way to do that. You know, if someone were to buy one of these D.H. Horton houses for, say, $300,000 or whatever the number ends up being, they're not going to be able to sell that house for any more than $300,000 plus whatever incremental increases are allowed. So if it's 8 units, if it's 6 units, it's a drop in the bucket of what we need to solve here. And so I'd like to see the in lieu fee be parlayed into something much more significant. when the consultant described 12 families being able to help immediately, if that's the route we go, that's suddenly, twice as many families that can be helped. I think that number will grow significantly as we study it and try to figure out density issues, how are we going to add more units to our city, and we're not going to do it 6 units at a time. So I'd like you to consider how we might take a much bigger view at this. And look, I want my own kids to be able to buy a house. It's going to be a long, long time before that happens, but we need to solve our affordable housing issue. So that's my perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heschler. May I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Okay. I don't think we need to vote on that one because I'm in favor. All right, council discussion.
I think in this regard, we run the risk of going down a bit of a straw man path that it's either forever for purchase and then forever for rental. I think this is the idea that the long-term future of RHNA numbers and affordable housing being rental, that may be true. That doesn't necessarily have to be true in this particular instance. As a bit of an opener, I would say that uniformly, to Mr. Heschler's point, you go around the country and you can find problematic examples of for purchase affordable housing and the way that you don't see with rental units, but that presupposes that you have a housing authority to run a rental program, which we obviously do not yet, and this would look to seed. I think that one thing that's worth rehashing is a bit of, when we talk about, and moderate obviously wasn't listed on here, that low, very low, and extremely low would still be able to apply. We just suspect that they will not be able to succeed because we cannot subsidize the property tax and we cannot subsidize the homeowner fees. And that's where the real encumbrance comes on that lower instance, those lower income threads. But I think there's a lot to be said for the fact that between these two plans, we're talking about 4 units. And it's 4, we would gain 4 units in a hypothetical, whereas we have 8 units now. And I think that is a very important delineator in the difference. I think that there is great merit in having more units and having them for rent because we do not have a facility currently to monitor for purchase units. And we would subcontract that out to an inspection process for which we get $300,000 over 10 years or something, $300,000 over 20 years to inspect them with very little oversight. So I think that is not an ideal solution on that regard. But by the same token, we're talking about the gain of 4 units. So I guess I will be the first to say I sort of liked the initial Planning Commission recommendation from 7 months ago or now 10 months ago, where they were in favor of expanding this to moderate units with a caveat that I think that lottery system was bogus, or not bogus, but poorly conceived. So that's what I think.
Thank you, Chris. Mayor Pro Tem, would you like to go or would you like me to go?
Go ahead.
Okay. I heard some things loud and clear. One is that it is 4 additional units. You figure that's at least 12 people that will live in El Segundo. The funds, I do believe the funds will be available in the future. I think based on all the legislators that I've spoke with, it will be coming. There will be additional funds for housing. There's another project in the works right now that has an affordability component. It has to go before the Planning Commission. I don't think that's happened yet, but it is a sizable project that will have a significant impact on the number of housing inventory that more than we've ever had in a long time. They already have an affordable component, and I think that we can use some of these funds to potentially, with that project, and maybe even get more out of it. The civil servants, I have affinity for them. I served in the military, as did my colleague, Mr. Pimentel. They do get paid less, especially teachers. Government employees, not so much anymore. And they also have pensions that the rest of us do not have in private industry. The Planning Commission came forward with recommendations, and they have the expertise, and I appreciate that. And also, there's compelling evidence right now. And by the way, it took me 21 years to afford a house in El Segundo. And Mr. Heck, you know this. I rented a 2-bedroom house apartment and lived in that thing with 2 kids as a single dad for many, many, many years. And it took 25% down to make that happen. So I understand firsthand how difficult it is, and I cannot believe people can come up with 10, 20% of a $2 million, $1.8 million house. I appreciate the problem. Nothing that we're going to do on the dais is going to fix that problem. There's compelling evidence in The Economist recently. There's a really extensive 8-page article on housing in this country. Strongly encourage you to read it if you're interested. And they make the argument that actually home ownership is not better than renting in the long term from a financial stewardship standpoint personally. And like I said, just to sum it up, I believe that this is the way forward. I think the $5.3 million will be leveraged for far more and I think that at the end of the day, there are 8 families that might be able to purchase. What happens to the 1,000 other people or the 992 other families that would also like to purchase an affordable house in this town? I don't know if that's a number, but it's a significant number. So there are going to be far greater unhappy people than there will be happy people by this decision tonight, regardless of which way we go. But I do believe the $5.3 million will get us much more than the additional 4 units in the future. That's my position.
One quick question on that. I mean, if we, let's say in this, if we did not go with the in lieu fee, we could still, that program can exist in the future with money from any other, with any other development agreement, right? This is not, we are not foreclosed from going through that program in the future based upon, this is not a gatekeeper for that. I mean, that RFQ doesn't go away by virtue of our decision tonight.
I would agree with that. Just $5.3 million is significant seed funding for any type of problem, to give us that start. And maybe you could kind of, Scott, I see you want to talk.
To help provide clarity, and I'm not trying to be argumentative, but the 5.3 will position the city to leverage those monies for other monies for affordable housing projects, such as the federal tax credits of 4%, 9%, and other sources of money. And the mayor made reference to an apartment building project with a significant number of units. That will allow us to leverage a greater commitment in that project to more units that will be rental for 55 years. You've heard some very compelling cases here. They're absolutely compelling. And you do have a bird in the hand in terms of getting 6 or 8 units. If you go with the 8 moderate, then we lose the 2 extremely low, 2 very low, and we have to figure out how to deal with that. I've shared with the Planning Commission one time and with each council member individually, when you've been in this profession a long time, you see things and have been through it, and I've been through the downside of affordable owner-occupied housing. When a project very much like this, several families had been in it for several years. They wanted to move out. Their circumstances changed. Their incomes went up. They wanted to go and buy a single-family home. But the fact that they had the restriction, they couldn't sell it at market rate, and they had to sell it below. I sat in the council chambers and watched one family in particular cry in front of the city council asking for relief, and we couldn't do anything. And that was a turning point in that city, and the council said going forward they would never do owner-occupied affordable housing again, and they would be rentals. So there are experiences like that. There's no right or wrong answer. We're telling you is with our consultants and our professional experience, this is a unique opportunity to start leveraging funds, put money in the bank, use that to produce more affordable housing rental for the long haul. But again, there's no right or wrong answer. The bird in hand is in front of you. It's our recommendation, that of your planning commission, and our consultants with decades of experience. If you want to have a greater impact on the RENA numbers for the long haul, the in lieu payment's the way to go. I hope that provided clarity.
No, it does. I mean, the planning commission, when they first recommended moving to moderate and turning down a $3 million in lieu fee, was because there was no plan that existed on what to do with that $3. And now there is the concept of a plan. I think all we're discussing now is there enough immediacy in the plan to produce the kind of effects that we want? I think that's a bit of it. And Carol, I've taken your time. I apologize.
That's okay. No, I mean, I've heard both sides, and I feel for both parties, and I understand both positions. I think, though, we do have to look for the bigger picture and look long-term. And so I'm leaning toward the idea of moving toward a rental and putting the money into the 5.3 million into a rental, affordable housing.
Thanks, Mayor Pro Tem. Chris, further thoughts?
I would only throw this, and this is just I guess I'll put us in a bit of a time machine, is the way we just used to discuss these things a bit in the past, is that there are, when it comes to affordability, one of the significant gains that you maintain with affordable housing at any price range is that as you mix it in a housing element, you achieve greater success stories in terms of capital improvements and all of these sorts of things. When we talk about concentration, which we might get in this, if we're having buildings that become concentrated elements of low and extremely low, then sometimes you have a concentration effect where you do not get the gains that you do by having it interspersed in a neighborhood the way we do at Pacific Landing at the Waypoint development. So I think there's an element that as we look down the road, if we're looking at a housing project element on, somewhere that the city owns, we have to be very conscious of the effects that come with that and the services those things require in a way that the dilution you would see at Waypoint would not.
Yeah, I mean, I'm immediately think back to my experience growing up in Chicago and some of the housing projects that were done there. But I think this is completely different in the sense that there's no way, I don't think it's going to be feasible for us to find that density of projects. I think we're going to be, if I had to guess, with the exception of maybe this big project they're proposing on PCH, which will be interspersed because you'll have some affordability in high-end leasing and some for-sale townhomes is currently proposed. I think you're going to see them spread out, dispersed through town, just because there isn't, I don't think, the availability for a building or an area at $5.3 million. Let's say we leverage that to 8. What are we getting at that point? We're getting 16, 20 units potentially? Scott, yeah.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, that's great dialogue, and that would be our recommendation to council is not to concentrate an income population in one neighborhood, but to do it in a dispersed way, and having that affordable housing.
I don't want to cut you up, but I think I asked about the dispersion element before, and I think that the plan forward that Mrs. Head addressed is that this would require it all to be in one unit.
If you were to spend 5.3 by itself, right? That's if you spend it by itself, but with the project that's coming up, you could get, 5% of the total. There are cities that are very successful in not concentrating, and it would be our professional recommendation, do not go down that path. We don't want them, you don't want to concentrate any one class in one area. You want to spread it throughout the community. And this one project that's coming forward, as the initial plans that we've seen at the staff level, it's a beautiful project. It'll be the market rate rents, and so you would intersperse the affordable units in there, and you wouldn't even know it. Cities that are successful at this, you don't know that there are affordable units mixed in.
But would that developer be providing those units, or would we be using our funds to purchase units within there to be for rent, or both?
They would be providing the units. We could use that money to help leverage the numbers. Okay, Kathy, you want to?
Under the scenario that you're speaking of the larger project, that would be the one opportunity where you could take limited funds and disperse over a larger number of units rather than one single project. I think it's really important, though, that it would need to be a large project like that, that also then had an obligation to you, much like Waypoint did, so that then that project would produce some affordable units, and you could contribute your $5.3 million to get more affordable units. So it's seed money again. But I could just, no, I'm not.
Will we be presupposing that the developer would be okay with that?
Yes. Yes, that I know.
Well, I mean, they would be okay with not just their set aside, but with us also purchasing units for attainable housing within their facility.
Yeah,
Can we just, hold on, this is a hypothetical example.
Yeah,
that I
we're
brought
crystal
up.
balling, yeah.
Yeah, that was one example. There are going to be other examples of housing coming forward. I can think of a couple right now, and I think that the opportunities, we're not going to be able to approve development without an affordable housing component. We know that. It happened to Huntington Beach and Newsom Suitum. So we're going to have to insist on it, and the question is, can we use these funds to get more housing out of them? And in the one on PCH in particular, I'm thinking they're absolutely proposing affordable housing, but maybe there's an opportunity to add housing if they're open to it, but that might not happen.
And, Mr. Mayor, and the council said, because, see, we're just scratching the surface, and you got to start somewhere as a community, and we don't have a housing authority or provider. We got to start somewhere, and as we have more success, more opportunities will come to the plate. There's also the density bonus option. Maybe down the road we have an inclusionary housing ordinance. There's all sorts of tools that we need in the toolbox. Right now, we don't even have the toolbox. So once we get the toolbox, we'll put the tools in, and we can leverage and do some really exciting and innovative things. Once we get the housing operator on board, we might even be eligible for Section 8 federal subsidy assistance. So having the provider will open a bunch of doors that aren't open to us at this point in time. So I hope that helps provide a little bit more clarity. But we have talked with the applicant who's doing this project. They would be more than receptive to providing affordable units. And this 5.3 could help produce even more.
Well, one additional thing to add is that we know with the new RENA numbers that are upcoming that we will have to find opportunities to increase the density in parts of our city. And so if you recall, the council had directed Planning Commission to study the Washington Park area, and that study has been completed. Then we're going to look at affordability, the economics of densifying, building bigger units there. And that study and the report will be brought forth to you in a month and a half. And also to add, on the RFQ issue, the specific dates of that is we planned on, with the help with the consultants, to get the RFQ out within 2 months. And we hope to get a housing development, housing management entity on board within 6 months. And so, during that discussion, we hope to have at least a very rough plan of what the housing development could look like within the next 24 months.
I mean, those things don't require the $5.4 million, though. I just want to make sure that these are not, they are correlated, but they're not causal to one another. I mean, obviously, we could pay for part of it with the $5.4 million, but we bought 5 motorcycles for $300,000. I mean, we can find the money if we need it.
Chris, you want to read, what's your official position on
But
this?
look, I would, and I apologize for misspeaking about the lottery. I did not intend to determine it as bogus. I think half of it worked, and I think we'd apply that, the one half of the lottery segment to all 8. I would like to see the 8 moderate plan that we were ready to approve in July. I think, if I were a betting man, I think that would have passed if I hadn't opened my mouth about the PCS for military members being injurious to it. I would like to see that plan because it puts people in houses, it puts keys in the doors now, not 2 years from now. And I would like to see us proceed with the RFQ and proceed with these pieces that we look for our long-term planning as a corollary. And I think that the only difference is we do lose the seed money element, and I gather that is not a trivial amount of money, but we're only talking about a difference of 4 units.
4 that we know of right now, right?
Pardon?
4 that we know of right now with certainty.
Correct.
So you want to direct staff to do what then? Go back and revisit the 8 and in parallel look at the 5.3 and compare with, or no? You just
No, I would like to just, as I said from my phone, and granted I was calling in annoyingly from overseas for that last meeting, to put a red line through one half of that lottery system, and I would go with that. I mean, I still liked that plan, the 8 moderates.
Okay, so there's only 2 in support of the current ordinance. What do you propose, Mr. King or Mr. Mitnick?
There is the option to wait for your 5th council member. I don't know, because if you direct us to go back,
there's an urgency to this, and I get that. I don't mean to cut you off. I mean, I think that we have. I am here to make my compelling argument that we should put people in the houses that currently exist and let them turn their lights on. I do not want to drag this out any further. If your will in 2 to 1 of this is that we should take this and get moving, I will. I can't agree with that. I can agree with it because it gets this moving and it gets people toward houses and it gets this housing development off the ground. I can do that. I would rather, and my druthers, say that we have the moderate housing that I think most people generally like the look of a year ago.
I hear you, and I know that even if we go forward with the 8 or 6, there's going to be time commitment for that as well. We have to set up, we have to stand up an agency. We have to go through the lottery process, which will take some time. I mean, there's some considerable vetting and disclosure that has to take place. So either way, we're not looking at next month for certain. Maybe the consultant could give us a little sense of, if we went forward with a 6 or 8, what would that timeline look like in terms of before we could get people in their homes?
Well, the 6 doesn't work. No, it just doesn't work. So you'd have to give the units to the people and then give them money in order to do that. So the 6 is a non-starter.
So we would then have to have staff come back with the proposed ordinance for 8, which would be as early as, when would that be the possibility?
April.
April. That public hearing process would take us through
The ordinance would take effect in May.
May. People in their homes, ideally, best case scenario?
I think we had talked about it
DR Horton
taking
saying no over there, not in their
4 to 5 months for the lottery. I mean,
6 months for the lottery.
yeah.
So we're looking at the end of the year, potentially.
If all goes well, yes, sir.
Okay. And we don't know yet on the other, it could be, can you remind us, I'm sorry, Kathy, on the in lieu fee, I think you said 6 months we'd have the language and the plan to appease Sacramento, and then maybe 18 months to 24 months before we get people in their homes?
Well, we think it's a 24-month process, just all in. If I could just make one ancillary comment that is a complete non sequitur. I think another thing to think about with affordable ownership in this particular case, or any case in this matter, is we've had generational low interest rates, mortgage interest rates, for the last 10 years. Affordable housing price is directly tied to affordable housing cost, which the major component of is mortgage. And if mortgage interest rates go up over time, you're going to find yourself in a position where people have to sell the house for less than they paid for it, because the affordable price will fall. It's just another one of the little catchy things about ownership. I mean, if we'd had more typical interest rates, it wouldn't be as much of a problem, but it is something I run into because of the fact interest rates are so low.
Thank you for that.
That's what happened to us before.
Chris, I'll turn it over back to you, unless, Scott, you look like maybe you're going to say something? No? Mr. Pimentel?
That
Or
brought
not.
back a lot of memories.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Chris?
I mean, I want to bite my tongue a bit here, but I am significantly disappointed that the moderate housing concept that up until 72 hours ago we were talking about as the other option here is not one of the options before us. That we're placed with the unattainable 6 straw man and the $5.3 million buyout, with the option being that the 8 one would take a revisitation and coming before in April and months down the road. That is I am fundamentally confounded that we are here deliberating something that is totally unworkable and something that may be unpalatable. And the one that might be is not an option in any reasonable time frame. That is really remarkable, because now we're presented with no choice, right? That family's been sitting there waiting for their house for months, right? We hang them out to dry while we deliberate. I mean, that's not an option either. So we are stuck with only one option. Like, I'm not even sure why we had a meeting. We only have one option. Why don't we just stamp our feet and say go? I think we have done this is a miscarriage to the deliberative process, and I'm not particularly pleased.
And to those lines, I'm surprised that there's no plan for the lottery process, when, that should have been done at the time when the plan was devised. And it's surprising that there's no plan for the lottery process. Like, that should have been at the time when it was negotiated, a plan should have been done before the buildings were even completed.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, we hear you loud and clear. If it is council's desire to go down the path of the 8 moderate, we can put that in place. We hear the concerns. You also have the opportunity to continue this again, to your next meeting when, or a date when you have the other council member, or I'm not quite sure how else to go forward. And we are sensitive to the one family that's been on hold here, and we'd like to be able, if I can be so bold, to work something out with them in DR Horton to take that issue out, no matter what direction we go forward.
So we need to make a decision. So what, I've made mine. Carol, are you standing by your position, or are you changing?
No, I'm going to stand by it.
Chris?
Well, look, this is, in order to pass things for a quorum, it has to be 3-0. But I'm sensitive to the fact that the majority view on this is not in my favor. I would rather us move down a route to some form of attainability and getting this thing moving. I think hold the nose is the wrong term, and I admit that I'm not happy, so I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think this is a tremendous miscarriage of the way that this should have been handled. So I will vote with my colleagues here to approve the in lieu fee, but I will not do it with any great joy.
Thank you, Chris. And I just want to remind everyone that I believe this process started, how many years ago? Was it 5? There was a recommendation that was before 2 prior councils, if I remember correctly. So
Right, it's sort of delineated in the
don't shoot
report.
the messenger, so to speak. All right, we have 3. I'm going to continue with next up, which is the city attorney will read the ordinance by title only.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, if it's okay with you, I'll go ahead with the resolution. There's a resolution of the El Segundo City Council approving an amendment to environmental assessment number 1154 and a modification to condition of approval number 15 to allow the developer DR Horton CA2 Inc. to pay a fee to the city for affordable housing purposes in lieu of the city affordable housing requirement, and authorizing the city manager to terminate the affordable housing agreement with the developer. And that resolution is up for consideration.
Thanks. Who will introduce the ordinance?
I'll introduce it.
Second reading and adoption of the ordinance is scheduled for March 17, 2020. City attorney will read the resolution by title only. Done. And we're just going to go through the motion process. May I have a motion to adopt the resolution?
So moved.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. 3-0. Reluctantly noted. Okay. Mr. Nichol is back. Thank you. We are on to item 9. Continued public hearing and introduction of revised ordinance number 1614 for zone text amendment, creating a 1-year pilot program to allow and regulate short-term rentals in the city's residential zoning districts through a short-term rental permit process.
Can I ask, did we introduce the ordinance?
Yes, the ordinance
Okay.
was introduced and there was a motion taken. Thank you.
All right, and let's see, I think,
I have to recuse myself. I have a common law conflict, not based on political reform, but an emergent relationship between my employer and one of the companies in this industry.
thank you, Mr. Pimentel. All right. This is a time and place here to fix for a public hearing, and it's a continued public hearing and introduction of revised ordinance number 1614 for zone text amendment, creating a 1-year pilot program to allow and regulate short-term rentals in the city's residential zoning districts through a short-term rental permit process. City clerk, was proper notice of the hearing given in a timely manner?
Yes, it was.
Thank you. Has any written communication been received regarding this public hearing?
Yes, 3 written communications was received in the city clerk's office.
Thank you. Public hearing is now open. Mr. Mitnick, who will make the presentation?
Planning manager Greg McLean.
Thank you again. With regard to short-term rentals, we covered a lot of ground last time, and I don't want to repeat a lot of it, so I'm going to focus mainly on issues that were brought up at the February 18th meeting and changes that we made to the ordinance and explanation of why we made those changes. So the first issue that came up was regarding caps or limits on things, and there were 4 that were brought up. One was nights or bookings per year. And I will say that we did a lot of research, which I'll go into later, of over 30 cities since the last meeting. And none of the cities that we researched limit bookings per year. So I don't recommend we follow that. Nights per year is capped by several cities, I'll say that. Total guests per night. Understanding was 12 was a good number, so we've included that. And guests per bedroom, 2 per bedroom was the direction I understood, and whether children would be included in the caps. And we are following the example of most cities that we found where children are not included in the cap. And children would be defined as 12 and under, and in almost every case we saw that as the definition of children or child. And that definition was added to the more recent draft. Also, there was a very confusing discussion about R1, R2, R3, what's allowed in each of those, and ADUs. And I tried to sort it out in the staff report, and I probably didn't do a very good job, so I'm going to try again. To make it really clear, the first thing is a single-family home, if it's in a residential zone and it's the primary residence of the owner of the property, that's good. According to the ordinance that you have, that would be allowed as short-term rent. This is where it gets confusing. A duplex is okay, provided that the property owner lives in one of the units. Now, the way that it's written, and this came from our understanding of direction that we received, either unit could be rented short-term as long as the property owner lives in one of those units. Condominiums are okay to short-term rent in the R2 if it's a primary residence, but not okay in the R3. I don't remember why that distinction is in there. I think it was because related to the duplex issue, but that's the way the ordinance is written right now. Apartments, generally not okay. This is related to taking up valuable living space, impacting the housing shortage kind of thing. The one exception that did make it in somehow was that in the unlikely event that the owner of the apartment lives in the apartment, then that owner can rent that unit if that's where they live as their primary residence. They can't rent out any of their other units, only their own, and only if it's their primary residence. So that's the one exception there. No ADUs at all. That's state law, city law, if you adopt this, and it's not allowed. So before I go on, does anybody have a question about this? Because I know this was confusing last time, and okay? We're good?
Just want a clarification on
Yeah.
the condominium. It was approved by the HOA.
Yeah, well, HOA would have the ability to override this.
Supersedes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about the research. I'm going to blaze through this. I'm not going to tell you what every city we found is doing because it would just take all night. But I will say that I will give you a flavor of the cities that we investigated. And these, the research we did into these cities informed our ultimate decisions to what to include and what not to include in the ordinance. So we found a number of cities locally that have bans. Manhattan Beach, Redondo Beach, there's 4 cities on the Palos Verdes Peninsula. Lawndale, I'm not sure why. But those are the cities we found that banned. Partial ban, as I mentioned last time, Hermosa Beach, they started off by allowing it, then they didn't allow it, then they kind of allow it in non-conforming residential buildings and commercial zones. It's weird. But they don't allow it at all in the residential zones. Santa Monica, Los Angeles, and I just discovered that Las Vegas have homestay-only options. I took the opportunity last week to go onto the Airbnb site for each of these cities and search deliberatively for whole house rentals. They all have a lot, all of them. So my take is that this isn't working for them. Short-term rental permits with zoning limits, Torrance, for example, requires a conditional use permit. Oakland also does, but they have very peculiar rules on where they can do that, such as next to the freeway or downtown or next to the waterfront. I couldn't understand it. Honolulu has 2 zones where they allow it. You can short-term rent in the condominium zone, or you can homestay in the bed and breakfast zone. So I wouldn't recommend this approach because it creates the impression that you've given somebody a property right that you that they're not going to let you take away very easily. 3 cities locally are still working on their ordinance, and my understanding is that these are all going to be permit processes. Hawthorne definitely. As a matter of fact, they started their process in September. They're probably either done this week or next week. I guess it's easier there. We looked at a lot of California cities that have permit processes. Most of them are in the Bay Area. Palm Springs is notable. They have a very involved and complex system with really strict rules and really high fines. But they also have an entire city department devoted to short-term rentals. So I don't want to go down that route. I wouldn't recommend it. There were many resort communities that we found, but since there wasn't much to learn from them because they're all highly specific. They're ski towns or they're, you know, like next to Carmel or something like that, that we just took note of them. We also looked at 10 cities around the United States that allow short-term rentals. There's a lot of commonality in these. For example, most of them require primary residence. A lot of them have other things in common, but you know, there's differences. They're all different. There's no two that are alike. But we found a lot of best practices by looking at these. So now briefly I want to talk about some of the changes that you'll see in the version that you have now relative to the one you had last time. So the first is that we shortened the duration of the pilot program to 12 months. And part of that is just to keep it simple, keep it short, just try it. If it doesn't work, we'll quit. We'll get our data in 12 months. I added a definition of primary residency. It's where the owner spends at least 183 nights. Simple as that. We put a cap on 1 booking per night. We had that in an older version, but it was taken out later. And in the last version it wasn't in there, we put it back. And that's partly because of requests from the city attorney. When you have a cap of 12, but you don't have a limit on the number of bookings, it gets kind of confusing. If something goes wrong, who's responsible? So we're just going to have that cap of 1 booking per night per unit. There were 3 technical requests made by Airbnb. They're very minor. The city attorney tweaked them a little bit, and they're in there. I took the liberty of removing all the references to the renewal of the permit program because this is a pilot program. There is no renewal, so we just took it out. If this leads to a permanent program, we'll put that stuff back in. One change that we did not make, and this is based primarily on the experience of Santa Monica and Las Vegas, was we did not do the home share only. It's still an option. If you prefer to do that, we'll talk about that a bit. I put this up on the dais, and it's available for the public as well. This is just a summary of the highlights of the program in general. And this includes old things and new things. And I'm not going to read this, but there's a lot there. So let's talk about what the options are. First option would be to introduce this ordinance tonight, and then it would be available to be voted on at the March 17th meeting. The next option would be if there's parts of it that you don't care for anymore, then give us direction and we can change it, and then you can introduce it at March 17th meeting. The other one would be to continue this to a date uncertain, and we can just keep gathering data and see where it goes. There's probably other options you could think of. You could direct us to do a ban or whatever. Well, that's pretty much the end of my presentation. So if you have any specific questions about the new version, I'm available to answer.
I just want to remind everybody the public hearing on this item closed February 18th, 2020, and we're going to open it up for council discussion.
I just have a question for the city attorney. The item regarding 1 booking per night, I understand the rationale, but again, I don't know. Of those 3 options, would we be allowed to strike an item, 1 line from the ordinance, and introduce it tonight?
Yes.
Okay.
If I can, our rationale is that if there's a cap of 12 and you have multiple bookings, you could have multiple bookings of, 5, 6, 7, 8 people, and no one is held responsible because they each made their individual booking, where collectively they have more than 12. So from our office's perspective, it makes the ordinance just impossible to enforce. if you have multiple bookings plus a cap.
But
And-
wouldn't the host be responsible?
Well, the idea is that, if you have multiple bookings, then, it would be the people that are making the reservations, they may think that they can add additional people, They may bring additional people that would exceed the cap. So our recommendation is just to have a cap and and just limit it to one booking per night.
I understand your concern. I'm still going to ask that we strike it if we move forward tonight. Thank you, David.
So I was thinking about that, because basically then if you have multiple bookings, it can become a hotel, and there could be 5 people, or if it's a 4-bedroom, 4 different people staying in a house, and you will have a hotel basically next to you that's multiple people. And I understand the reason why you had the regional ask for having multiple bookings is because if there is 2 people sharing a house, they book individually. But I think that the control of having just one will limit the full house being used, rather than just a home share, which I'm in favor of.
And I was more concerned when we discussed this 2 weeks ago regarding the number of nights and the regularity. But seeing as, those caps are not used elsewhere,
Well, they are used in many places, but when looking at the 10 large cities that I had up there, most of them are using other means, in particular the primary residency. And I believe that you may have received some correspondence today from Airbnb that also cites that. We've looked at it pretty carefully, and we think that that's the better tool in this case. It wouldn't impact the home share people, because they're there anyway. It would only limit the whole house renters. They would be limited effectively to 182 days. So we felt that the cap that we had discussed was somewhat redundant. And then if you read the staff report, you'll see that I had a discussion that you may or may not agree with about limiting the number of nights. Sort of enhances the value of each night you can have, and then it kind of has the potential to make the renters who are willing to pay the most are probably not the ones that you really are trying to get. It's a theory anyway. So we don't recommend that for that reason. So we'd rather just let the primary residency be the control factor there. It's our recommendation. Of course, you can direct others.
Now, in this 12-month period of the data being collected, are we going to be able to see per home the number of bookings and or the number of nights and or both as part of the data that we're going to receive?
The number of...
Because if it's,
Well, if we
let's say we eliminate this one booking per night.
Oh, okay. In that
Okay.
case, I was going to say it would be the same unless you
It
eliminate
would be the
that.
same unless...
Yeah.
But if we eliminate the only one booking per night,
Yeah.
will we get data to know that, okay, that home was booked, 250 nights out of the year, this many nights it was double booked, this many nights it was single booked. To Carol's point, this, one of the fears that we have is that a home becomes a hotel, and, it has 5 neighbors, and all those neighbors are impacted by this hotel use. And so in that 12-month period, I just want to make sure that we are going to get that data, so we know whether that is a reality and it's a problem we have to deal with, or if it's not.
Yeah, there should be 2 ways to get at it. One would be the TOT reporting, and the other would be if we're getting complaints. And if we're getting a lot of complaints and it's not matching the TOT, then we would suspect that there's some deception going on there, and we would monitor it more carefully. And that may be indicating a bigger problem with the program, which is why we're recommending a pilot program. So, we think we'll get that information, absolutely, through one of those means or the other.
Got it.
I recall, Carol, I was just going to say, I recall hearing, we got correspondence on this several times from a couple of people, one in particular, where they do rent out more than one, tenant's the wrong word, what do you call them? Guest. In their home, separate rooms. And in fact, when I was knocking on doors, I can recall one specific family, older
couple on the east side of town, and they would rent out more than one, certainly, on a regular basis, and had no issues that the neighbors had talked about. So I think you're trying to get at it from one standpoint, right, which is, can we get data on that?
I just want to make sure, since you're not giving me my cap.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to know at the end of this 12 months, I want to have the data. Because if there's a home that's being rented out 330 nights out of the year, I want to know.
Yeah.
Because that's what that's the fear.
Yeah, and we'll be able to map these things too, so that we'll be able to map the where the rentals are and where the volume of rentals are, and we'll be able to correlate that with where the complaints are coming in. And so if this kind of high volume place is happening in a home share environment and there's no complaints in that area, that would be one indication that there's a big nothing happening there essentially. On the other hand, if that's happening and there's a lot of complaints, then that would be a very strong case for going with home share if it turns out that's a whole house rental, right? Or a cap. Yeah, that's the kind of data we're looking for, because we really don't know how it's going to play out. Now we have the breaks available. We're going to come back in 6 months and give you a thorough report. We're also going to have monthly data available, and you guys can shut this down any time within the year. You don't have to wait for the 12 months if you feel like it's out of control. That's in the ordinance.
Now that we have a different attorney, although same law firm, I'm going to ask the question I asked last time, which is, you guys always have different opinions. Not always, but and I know there's new language changes so that it's even clearer now, very explicit, but we're not going to be, what's the risk that will be challenged by current Airbnb hosts who say, you've allowed me to do this for 11 months and you can't take this away from me?
You mean as far as the ordinance being
Yeah,
a
we kill
pilot
this
program?
thing at the end of the 12 months, pilot's done.
I think the risk is low that they would be successful and be able to successfully challenge the city. Because we made it clear that it's a pilot program, so there's no expectation that it's going to be a long-term. That's why we supported the pilot program, is because if you just put it in place, there's an argument that they have a real property interest. So I think the idea is to have a pilot program. We're comfortable with the language where you can terminate at any time, and I think the risk is low.
Thank you.
So I just have a couple things. I'm just concerned that if we're the only South Bay city, other than a small portion of Hermosa Beach, then do we become a target for people purchasing these houses to use as short-term rentals? Because people do them for business. That's why I'm really very supportive of just home share only. Because I don't want to become that beacon of, El Segundo, that's a place where we invest,
Yeah.
And then you had said something last time about, the right for them to continue if this is a pilot program and then we say, oh, it's working great, and we extend it, but we make it permanent, then we could never take that right back again.
Oh, I don't think I said that, because I don't really know if that's the case.
I thought there was a right
that probably came from the attorney,
Okay, maybe there was
the other attorney.
I think there is an argument that if there is no end date, then people potentially could argue that they have a real property interest, and it's a property right that the city would not be able to take away without due process, I should say. So we could issue permits, but we'd have to have a process in place to be able to revoke those permits, and we'd have to have evidence to show how that property owner has violated the ordinance. We can't just give people a permit that's a land use permit, a real property permit, and then just take it away willy-nilly without any evidence at all.
Manhattan Beach dealt with this. They allowed it, and then when they took it away, I believe it was in April, they allowed the people who had the permit to continue it, grandfather it, until the end of the year in December, just because of this concern that you're not just taken away immediately.
But there's nothing that would prevent us from doing another pilot for a longer period of time. Is that correct?
Exactly right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And then what was the reason why Manhattan Beach pulled it?
I spoke to the community development director there, and they gave it a try. The council believed that they wanted to do it, and they received complaints. They received complaints from several of the neighbors, so they brought the item back to council, and based on the public hearing, they decided to pull it. Now, it's been going back and forth, and I think most recently, I think it was last year, they reconsidered it, and they ended up keeping the ban.
When they allowed it, how many years ago was that, Sam?
I want to say 3-4 years ago. Yeah.
Did they have the same level of rigor in their ordinance that we have now, these safeguards?
It was similar.
They are
It was similar. I
They
mean,
still decided?
even today they're using the same consultant that we're considering. So it's it's a very similar market, similar enforcement elements.
Okay.
If I may, I hadn't answered Mayor Pro Tem's question about becoming a magnet. That's one of the things we will be having to watch for, and that's part of the reason why we're suggesting a pilot program, and another reason why we want to limit it to a year, because if we are becoming a magnet for the South Bay, that would be a good reason to, pull it in and say that's not what we want. I'm not very concerned because years ago we did, or maybe 2 years ago, we did a survey of residents, and one of the questions was, are you interested in being a host for short-term rental? And the number was very low. I'm sorry I don't have that number with me right now, but it was very low. It was like 15% or less compared to everything else. We were asking questions like, would you be interested in, using Airbnb or some other thing, not in the city but elsewhere, and the interest was reasonably high. It was like 50%. So there's just really not a lot of people that want to turn their home over to strangers.
Well, to the Mayor Pro Tem's point also, I mean, they're assuming we have the right compliance in place, which you've assured us we do. You can't have an investment property. You can't do what was done on Virginia Street because you have to have that as your primary residence, which we will be able to audit, essentially.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
We're going to include administrative guidelines that we'll be writing up if you approve this, between now and the start date of July 1st. And that'll include information like what would be acceptable proof of primary residency and things like that. So we were thinking all kinds of ideas like, your auto registration to that address, things that wouldn't necessarily be done for a second residence or some, So we'll have all those details hammered out before the program starts.
So we're in the ordinance that's being presented, does it say home share only?
No, it does not.
I'm really kind of,
I understand.
I'm pretty,
Yeah.
I feel strongly that it should be home share only. Because the majority of the people that have come to talk and say they need it for a income is home share.
No, I understand. We based our recommendation on the data that we saw when we looked at the Airbnb site and what was the other one? There was another one I was looking at, their competitor. And we drilled down on Santa Monica and Las Vegas. Los Angeles we didn't look at because it's only 9 months old and they probably don't have their enforcement up yet. And in both cases, it's not working because you can do a search for whole house rentals and find, almost 100 of them in each city. It doesn't work in our opinion, but if that's the will of the council, we can write that in.
Yeah, but at least it's some deterrent and it's something you can use. So by taking it away, you're just saying you're giving in. Just because it's not necessarily being enforced doesn't mean you should take it away.
And I'm sorry. The only other reason was we were just trying to keep the program as simple as possible. Yeah. And it's easier not to distinguish between the two than to.
Yeah, but then if you don't put the home share in there, then it could become a party house for that. And that's what we're trying to avoid. So I'm going to stick with my opinion that it needs to be home share.
Mr. Minnick?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I just want to interject, since we're a relatively small city with a small residential piece, it's a matter of enforcement, monitoring, and compliance. So we could step it up. We may end up costing us more, I don't know that, but that is an option for us if you choose to go that direction.
Mr. Nickel, do you have an
With
opinion?
only 3 of us up here, what do we need, Mr. King?
Well, from speaking with the city manager, we thought it'd be prudent to make sure that there's 3 votes that support any ordinance. Normally, to introduce an ordinance, you just need 1 vote. But as you all know, at a second reading, you have to have 3. So we were hoping we could get 3 votes tonight to introduce the ordinance, to bring it back.
Well, that said, then, Mr. Boyles, where do you stand on Mayor Pro Temp's position on the no whole home rental?
My position is the same as last meeting. I had the concerns. They've addressed all my concerns. I feel good about it. So I think home sharing should be allowed.
No.
No,
Yeah, home sharing allowed.
Home sharing should not be the only thing allowed, as I should say.
because, last meeting, and I'm not going to belabor all the points from last meeting that we discussed about, living next to potentially a house that is used for, people enjoying themselves on the weekends. It's still my concern that we may be setting up this pilot program and we may be setting certain limitations, but we're still not protecting residents potentially from another year of living.
Misery.
Yeah, living in a situation that is not one that they desire, not one that really, I would say, represents this neighborhood and our town. And after hearing the city attorney state that they would really like 3 people behind that, I would, being that it's a pilot, and we go down that road, and clearly, the few ruin it for the many in everything in life. The few ruin it for the many. And the 2 major issues we've had, and the only reason why there is a huge constituent of people from this town that are against this is because of 2 whole home rentals.
Well, they are whole home rentals. I would argue that the reason the one around the corner from me was so problematic was not because they were whole home rentals, but because the owner lived in San Diego and we didn't have a good code enforcement policy or mechanism in place. So I wouldn't say that is the only reason that happened, but yeah.
But
you had to enforce a code. I mean, I still think it goes back to the whole home. We are a community, and all the people that argue to say they need to have additive income to help stay in their home means that it should be home sharing. But if you're renting your whole home, then you're not living in town, so you're living in some other place. So, it doesn't, the whole argument of we need to have the ability to use short-term rentals to stay in our home doesn't sit with me if it's a whole home rental. That doesn't satisfy that argument. So if the argument is you want to keep people in their homes that have lived here a long time and they're retired and they want to ensure that they keep their home and stay in this community, then home sharing makes sense, but whole home rental doesn't.
I think you're assuming that that's not their primary residence again. Can I finish my thought?
Yeah.
You could live somewhere, it'd be your primary residence, and you could certainly take off for a month. And you could put that home on VRBO or Airbnb. If you, with your recommendation or proposed change, you wouldn't be able to do that. El Segundo could be your community. You could have spent a lot of time here. You could still spend a lot of time here, still want to travel as you get older, rent out your home, and still have it be your single-family home and still not have problems. So I understand both your points. I get it. I hear you.
Yeah, but you could still rent out your whole home for a 6-month rental, right?
Actually, no, you could rent it for longer than that, the way this is proposed.
days.
Yeah.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
you could.
so it doesn't have to be an Airbnb.
You could
like
rent,
it used to
yep,
be
that's true,
short-term.
that's true. What is to
What
that
is the
end,
definition?
is it 31 days or more? What's our definition of
Is it
short term?
30 or 31? 30. The
For a
distinction between
duration?
short and long term.
For a duration?
Yeah.
30, yeah, anything beyond 30 is.
And I would just caution too that there are ways around that. We already know that's happening in Manhattan Beach. People are renting longer than short-term rentals with an opt-out provision that's like $5. So There's always a way around anything that we craft, but I want to move this thing forward, so I get behind a pilot with no whole home, with home sharing
home share
only,
only, yeah.
just to move this thing forward and see how it goes for the next year. See if we hear from the public in terms of a lot of pushback. Maybe we won't.
That sounded like an introduction to me.
Well, we'll have to draft a new version of this, and we'll bring it back on March 17th with a home share only option. Okay?
Thank you for all your continued effort on this,
But do we have
Mr.
to-
King.
Can we just make that amendment?
No,
Sorry.
it's a pretty substantial amendment. I'm also thinking we may have to renotice it because that's a different ordinance than what was presented to the city council. I'll confer with staff and we'll bring it back as soon as possible.
Can you please eliminate item in 4-15-8A14? That's in the ordinance, 4-15-8A14. Only one booking per night is permitted. If you could please eliminate that.
Why, I would rather only have one booking per night.
There's plenty of home sharers that do 2 rooms in their house.
But then it becomes a hotel.
I
limit it to 2, then limit to
believe
2.
we'll get the data.
Okay, but
We
then
will get
limit
the
it to
data.
2. Then limit to 2.
When is this coming back?
Oh, it depends on whether or not we have to
17th.
re-advertise.
What we can do is what I can recommend, Mr. Mayor, is let's continue this to March 17th. If we don't have to renotice it, we can bring it back at that time. The noticing is like a little complicated.
Is there any benefit to continuing the dialogue right now?
Sure, yeah, I mean,
Okay.
staff, we want to bring
Okay.
back something that.
So then we need to get clarity on this last issue.
I
Because,
said eliminate it. Carol said make it
Because then it becomes a
limited to
hotel.
2 bookings per night.
correct, because then it becomes a hotel.
I disagree. I think we've already got so many precautions in place with this. Now we're talking about eliminating anything but home sharing. Someone's living in the house. I do not think there's going to be a problem with more than one person booking at the same night. And we know there are examples in town, several, where that works well.
But then it becomes a hotel.
I hear what you're saying, but
So,
with the way this reads, eliminating whole home rentals. If you allow, I would say let the pilot run. Let's get the data and see what it says. Because if we're not going to cap the number of nights, then either there's going to be the bad apples, the bad actors that come back and we get data that houses are turning into hotels, and then maybe this pilot program goes away, right? And the few ruin it for the many. But limiting it to 1 booking per night, I think is going to skew the data. It won't give us the true, it will not give us a true glimpse into what is actually happening and what our community's desire is my belief. Because people will find a way around that. Because if you've ever booked an Airbnb, you inquire, is your Airbnb available this date to this date? And you're messaging back and forth with the host, and the host will say, well, no, it's not. I already have my 1 booking for that night, but I have another room to rent. Pay me cash on the side. And now they're getting around TOT, they're getting around, it's going to completely change our data. So I would rather eliminate that and try to get people to work within these constraints and then give us the data points that we want so that we can decide what to do moving forward.
okay.
But I'm with you, and I have that fear, and if 6 months from now there are houses working as hotels in here, I will be the first one to make a motion to suspend the pilot program. Because that is not what I desire.
Carol, what do you say?
But if that's not what you desire, explain to me how it isn't a hotel if I have multiple bookings. If I have 2 to 3 rooms, if you have 3 rooms and rent it for 1 person for 3 rooms, how is renting it to 3 people in a night not a hotel?
I think a hotel implies many more units and much more turn. And these people could have a lot of turn in there as well. But remember, now they have to live in there. They have to be there. So are
Only
they
6 months
comfortable
out.
living, are these homeowners? No,
Oh, the
not.
whole time. Okay,
Yeah. Are they comfortable living in a hotel environment? Probably not.
Well, and if they are, then we'll know because we'll have the data. But if we put this limit in there, they will work their way around it. Because the one thing I will tell you is we can set an ordinance in place, but we can do our best to set something up. But if we try to stand in between people and their money and their income, they will find a way to make money. And I want the data points because I want to know, is this just our concern that it's going to be a hotel, but not the reality? If it's the reality, then we have the data and our concerns are validated and we can take action then. As of right now, we're just working off of guesses. I think we moved this thing a huge step forward by eliminating the whole home rental. Come on.
Yeah.
One more step forward, Carol.
All right, if as soon as we get one complaint about that, I mean,
That's fine. Now it's just a matter of you guys understand what we're talking about.
I understand the direction. There's a lot of parts of the ordinance that will have to be rewritten, so we'll get on it.
We apologize for that.
Mr. King, you have what you need?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if you want to go ahead and continue this to March 17th, please do so.
Okay, we'll be continuing this till March 17th. Do we need to vote on that? I don't believe we do we?
No, as long as there's consensus, that's fine.
Okay. Actually, yes, so we are going to, let's see, Carol, how much time do you want for the? Okay. We'll reconvene at 8:45. I'm going to recuse myself on items number 10 and 11. One of them relates to one of my properties, and the architect is involved with both.
So we're down to item number 10. This is the time and place and hereto fixed for a public hearing.
City clerk.
City clerk,
Um,
was proper notice of the hearing given to in a timely manner.
Yes, it was.
City clerk, has any written communication been received regarding the public hearing?
No, the city clerk's office has not received any written
The public hearing is now open. Mr. Mitnick, who will make the presentation?
Sam Lee, our Planning and Building Services Director.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. I just have a very brief statement before Paul Samaras provides presentations for actually both projects tonight. And I just wanted to point out, and it'll be clear in this presentation, but I just wanted to point out that in Smoky Hollow, as we have in all sites, all properties in our city, every lot has a basic code allowance, right? Zoning standards. And those standards stipulate how tall a building can be, how big of a building you can build, what the parking standards are, and whatnot. And the reason why these two projects are before you is that Smoky Hollow has something special beyond that basic code allowance. Smoky Hollow has, it allows an opportunity where an additional building rights can be granted at different tiers, some at the Planning Commission level and some at the council level. And if they comply or they comply with the 5 findings, if those 5 findings can be met, and if community benefits are provided. And if you recall, I think it was the last council meeting when the staff struggled with that community benefit, and we created a scorecard to take something that was more subjective and make it more objective, right? Make it quantify what the community benefits are. And I think we've done that. And the other 2 things that the community benefits must do is they must bear a relationship with the value granted for the property right as it relates to that project. And the second thing is that the community benefit must not only benefit the project or the occupants, but also to provide an area-wide benefit. Okay, and I think, I know it's a brief statement, but I think it'll help understand what Paul's going to go over right now.
Okay, so the first project before you is a request for a community benefits plan approval for a development project at 212 Eucalyptus Drive. This is just a little area map that gives you kind of a sense where the site is. So this is Smoky Hollow outline that is kind of colored purple over here, and the subject site in this case is in this location, not too far from City Hall, along Eucalyptus Drive. More specifically, it's just north of the corner there with Franklin Avenue. The project site is a little bit over 10,000 square feet. Today, there is an existing building on the site. The existing building is about 5,000 square feet. It's a 1-story building. The applicant proposes to demolish this existing 1-story building and to develop a new building, a 3-story office building in its place. So this is a rendering of the proposed building. You see it's a 3-story building, has a small office area on the ground level, and then it has most of the office area on the 2nd and the 3rd level here. This is just another perspective of that same building. You see the ground level office area is relatively small. Most of the ground level is reserved for the parking that will serve the site. And access to that parking is along the alley. This right here, directly next to the property and along the property, is a shared driveway that is there today, and it will remain there. It serves both this property for access through, and also the neighbor's property for parking that they have on that other lot. Sam mentioned the community benefits plan process. And as you're aware, the specific plan allows projects to exceed development standards in exchange for on-site, off-site improvements or other contributions that are of benefit to the community, to the area around the site. As you saw in the rendering, let me go to the next slide here. Great. As you saw in the rendering, we're dealing with a three-story building that is 50 feet tall, and that exceeds our base standard of 35 feet. The building is, the permitted FAR is 0.75, which in this case would allow a building of about 8,000 square feet, according to this base standard. The application is for a building that is approximately 14,000 square feet in size, 1.32 FAR. And the third requested exception in this case is a rear setback exception along the alley to accommodate the location of a required SE transformer on the property. Those are the requested exceptions. The applicant proposes these following four benefits, these four categories of benefits in exchange for the requested exceptions. Number one is public art. The applicant is proposing to put up a mural on the front facade of the building. This mural, and if you recall from the images in your packet, will kind of be inspired by the existing art that is on the existing building. This particular project, just I should note, is not subject to the city's newly adopted public art fee or program because it was the application was submitted before that program was adopted. But nonetheless, they are proposing art on their property, and that counts as a benefit, a community benefit. And that's according to the methodology that you reviewed and approved in January. The other benefit that they're providing is compliance with design guidelines of the specific plan above and beyond sort of a minimum level that is required, providing additional public parking, just to be a little bit more specific. So the public artwork will be a cost of about $90,000. The specific plan has design guidelines, 32 of them, and this particular design complies with 20 out of those 32 guidelines. They're providing 6 bike spaces above the minimum requirement. That will be of benefit to the community, the immediate area. And they're also proposing to make a contribution to a fund that will be set up and will be dedicated to public infrastructure projects in the Smoky Hollow area. So that way, these projects can help contribute to kind of make improvements in the public realm and the district. As I mentioned, as Sam mentioned, there are 5 findings listed in the specific plan that need to be made to approve projects. And you reviewed the methodology that staff proposed, and you approved that methodology. So staff used that approved methodology, and this is kind of a reminder of what that worksheet looked like. So we went through this process with the applicant, and we've been able to determine, or we believe that these 5 findings can be made in this particular case. And we recommend that the council adopt the draft resolution that we've proposed to approve this community benefits plan request. That's the conclusion of our presentation. We'd be happy to take questions. And the applicant is here to also speak on that project as well.
Paul, one question for you. This is, was it 2 meetings ago when we approved this the community benefits finding worksheet? And so this will be the first project that we're actually putting this worksheet to use on, correct?
Correct.
So just reading through the worksheet, because you didn't have the worksheet up there as one of your slides, correct?
Yeah, it may be a little hard to read at this scale, but yeah, but let me see if I can put it up there, if we can make some things out of that. It's a little harder to read, but you have it in your packet. It's one of your attachments. I can see if I can look that up.
Got it. So just so I understand this worksheet in its conceptual stage, now that we're actually putting it to use, if the community value share of the added value, which is 30% in this case, if it's less than 30%, then we're supposed to recommend additional community benefit, and if it's greater than, then it goes to the Planning Commission for recommendation and then on to us,
Correct.
right? All right. And so when we do this, the total cost for community benefits to the developer, so the developer is essentially coming out of pocket over $1 million in what is deemed by us as community benefit.
Yes.
And those, and what the applicant is asking for is estimated to add $1.2 million of value to the project,
Yeah.
based on this?
If I may.
Right.
Yeah, if I may, the additional square footage that they would be getting from this project, if it is approved, is 6,000 square feet. That additional 6,000 square feet increases the property's value by 1.2 million. So that's sort of the value generated, the additional value of that incremental change above the basic size. I hope that helps clarify that.
And then the community value of the proposed benefits totals 360 in this case.
Yes.
And so we take all that, and the 360 is 30% of the 1.2 added value.
Correct.
And the 1.2 added value, is that something that we are going to continually update year over year, or like the matrix to, get that
For this
that
particular
that
property?
value? No,
Oh.
I'm saying, for instance, you're saying 6,000 square feet is worth $1.2 million.
Yeah, I understand.
Today, what about next year? I mean,
Sure.
do we have a plan in place to adjust that?
Yeah, well, we will be doing this on a case-by-case basis. So in each particular case, we will be reviewing projects. And in this particular case, we had the help of a consultant that sort of has some expertise in this field and financial feasibility. And they reviewed pro forma information related to this particular project, and they looked at market conditions and projections, and they were able to help us estimate that the added value for this particular project is 1.2 million.
Perfect. So no one that the city actually employs decided that it was $1.2 million of added value?
That's correct.
All right, just wanted to make sure. No, thank you, Paul. You answered all my questions.
Okay.
So if you could go back to the slide of the community benefit.
Yes.
So I understand that no one employed by the city came up with the 1.2, but who came up with the 300,000?
The
360.
360,000?
Because that's where I was,
Yeah, that was
who's
part of-
determining
Sure.
the 360, that 6 bike racks equals X? Like, who's coming up with that?
Staff did. Before we came to you in January, we kind of put our heads together and try to come up with what would be a kind of a objective way to evaluate these community benefits and to assign value to these proposed benefits.
If you
And
go back to where you had, not that slide, there was another slide that showed, yeah,
these
this one.
numbers.
So 6 bike racks, like so just walk through the $360,000. Where's that coming from?
Okay, so that
Yeah, I know, I just wanted-
yeah, that is in the worksheet that we had in your packet. So in the worksheet, number one, let me see if I can get to the worksheet so I can give you a little sense here. So
Paul, if I can
Sure.
interject. If I recall, of the $360,000, some of the items were included in the financial analysis study.
yeah,
Like the bike rack, what we did was we were able to calculate in the analysis in the financial study. They were able to calculate what the cost is for a square foot. So we were able to calculate the size of a bike rack. Therefore, we were able to quantify what the value of that is. So like majority of the information came from the financial study from our consultant, but we extrapolated some of the information to get down to like bike rack type of information and whatnot.
yeah.
I mean, to me, a bike rack that's helping your tenant, providing space. I'm not sure how much that is a community benefit, because that's helping the tenant that's renting the building. So I'm just concerned, like, it's not a bike rack for the public to use, it's a bike rack for the tenant to use. So
It
how is that a
it
community project?
Yeah, it
A
is
community benefit?
intended to be for public use as well. So the applicant is.
They say that, I mean, it just, this is the first time we've done this, and I just want to make sure that we're not just coming up with, okay,
Yeah.
it's a little,
But
would
it's
little-
also, if I may, in that particular case, it's also a benefit for the public in the sense that more people will use the bicycles to go to this property rather than drive their cars.
that's a bit of a stretch for me.
But I think you're right. I mean, it depends, but it all depends on how it's located and where it's located, right? If it's in the middle of the property and it's only accessible to the tenants and the building users, then absolutely agree. But if it's located in a place where it could be used by others in that community or area, then we felt like it's allowed to get some points.
And how do we come up with the $14,200 and something dollars?
Actually, based on the other benefits that the applicant was proposing, they fell short of the 30% threshold. So we let them know, and they agreed to make an additional monetary contribution to this public infrastructure fund to make up that difference.
To hit the 30%.
So they're falling short
I see.
on the
So-
minimum
So it was
amount.
just staff that came up with the pricing then of each of the public benefits?
Yes.
There was no outside influence from it, there's just staff sat down and...
That's right. Yeah. We try to the best of our ability, kind of think of what your values are and what our goals are as a city in Smoky Hollow, and assign value to certain things like, complying with architectural design guidelines, or providing additional parking or things of that sort.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council, for our staff, I thought we had a consultant helping us with this, though.
Yes, the consultant helped us evaluate certain things, but when it comes to sort of the monetary cost, to the applicant to provide them. So the consultant helped us establish how much does it really cost the applicant to design and construct this building with all these features and amenities from a dollar point of view.
So we were relying on subject matter experts as well as our own staff's knowledge of the information.
That's correct. So
Okay.
we took that base level of information, and then we tried to assign it more of a community value. How valuable is compliance with design guidelines versus making improvements in the public realm, for instance, and assign sort of a value, a ranking, if I may.
Chris, do you have any comments?
No, I think this is the way the process is supposed to work, right? I mean, this is one of the nice things about the way we laid this out. One, you have a set of design guidelines to go off of, but we deliberated on how do we quantify public benefit, and some of this will be an iterative process. I think what, to Madam Mayor Pro Tem's credit is here, is that by applying some rigor now on the first ones, we're establishing kind of the case law by which all these other ones will be derived. So if we're saying that a bike rack is a public benefit, that we will calibrate the benefit based upon the square footage and theoretical location and placement of those bike racks, then that is going to become the precedent for the next ones after that. So I think that the rigor on this isn't to say, well, you guys got to a number that was 346,000 and then dinged them for another 14 to get to 360. That's not really the methodology here. The methodology is we're going to come up with a plan here, all of us, because these are our first two babies, after which we will name all the other babies. So making sure that we know what these are going to mean and how we're going to quantify them is an important piece. And I think probably a takeaway from this isn't so much are we valuing the bike racks the right way, it's that do we now understand that we have to have a system to say this is what bike racks will be good for, this is how we're going to determine the plus minus swag of what a mural is worth and how we're going to delineate it. So if we are set on our process for it, I would move to accept this as we have it, but with the understanding of now we know how we're going to assign a value of bike racks, And now we know that we will turn to an applicant and say, look, you are this far short of the benefit threshold. Would you care to make a contribution to the in lieu kitty? To which point he will likely turn around and say, well, how'd you come up with your number? And we can say, well, this is our process. So maybe that's something that maybe there is that is a form worth stapling to the back of our scorecard, so we can look and see the line items on public benefit and how they were calculated. Not so much as a make work, but just so we have a process that we can lean on if we have a less amenable applicant and a less amenable process.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think we are setting precedent. But the reason why Smoky Hollow is designed the way it is, and it's quite unique, is that what we found was that different parts of Smoky Hollow needed different things for the community benefit. So that's why we gave the freedom. But you're absolutely right. We are setting a precedent on future projects.
Well, and that's why it's exactly right, right? You go 6 blocks east, and someone has a bike rack, and we might say, look, there's already 20 bike racks here. Your bike rack is, you're only getting a half credit for this because we are subsumed the same way we do with coffee shops, right? There's the coffee shop calculator in there as well. So
Exactly.
I'm just saying, like, let's make sure we have a process that we like, because we're going to be stuck with it for a while. All right. I'll move approval.
All right. Any other question?
No, I will second that motion.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Would you like to open the public
I think
hearing?
this is a public hearing.
Oh.
Usually we have the applicant at least be able to speak.
Oh, so,
Defend your bike rack.
defend. So,
Does it have a falcon perch?
Sure, thank you, Paul. Good evening.
Will it
Mayor
fit
Pro
a
Tem.
mongoose?
so did we close the public hearing?
If you can open it, Madam Pro
Okay,
Tem
may I have a
Mayor.
motion to close the public hearing?
No.
No.
Yeah, open the public.
The public hearing is now open for public input. There you go.
Okay, good evening, council members and Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you very much. The discussion you guys had you guys are right on point. I think perhaps we're the first folks who have dealt with all of it, and we 100% agree. So at the council meeting last time, I said, I think I made a comment how genius the worksheet was, because when we were presented with it, we were kind of blown away. We just didn't know how to process it. But once you kind of realize what they did, they took a 139-page, very conceptually worded specific plan, and they turned it into a 2-page math problem. And it was, once you realize, okay, so the specific plan wanted 6 things here, and then they wanted 4 things related to inside your property and 12 things related to outside of your property, and then you get 1/6 or 1/12 of that portion of and so it made so much sense to us. And so we really commend Greg and the staff for doing that, and we were there every painful step of the way, and we really do think this worksheet is designed very well. So wanted to bring up just a few additional things, because we've been working on this for several years now, and it's such a cool project, and there's a few things that weren't mentioned. So firstly, the site, it's at the lowest point of Eucalyptus, which means that there's a large stormwater inlet right at the curbside, and then there is a broken manhole right at the alley, right on the rear property line. And then there's 2 city and county storm drain lines that connect Eucalyptus to the alley. So to do any of this, we first have to remediate those abandoned storm lines, which have to be dug out, capped, removed, and recompacted and refilled to do anything, which go to a public benefit that nobody can see. So Paul very well defined the ones that are in the worksheet, but there are so many others that are not sort of quantifiable. So additionally, there's a pretty tall residential building just to the south of us, and then an easement running to the north of us. And so we are a mid-block site, and the only criticism I could give to the worksheet is that for mid-block sites, it's actually much more difficult to achieve the minimum standard, because, for example, if you're not a corner site, there's one point you just can't get. And if you have an alley, there are certain things you have to do. So so mid-block sites are particularly difficult. So that's that portion. I want to talk about transformative projects. So a big portion of the specific plan is to push developers to do something transformative, and that's certainly subjective to define. But the architecture presented here tonight really is we call it celebratory. It's an embodiment of what Smoky Hollow is and should be and will be in the future. It's very expressive. It lets the inside out. It lets views from the outside in. If you're familiar with the site, there are 8 artist panels that are on the existing buildings. Those are going to be carefully removed and reapplied onto the building. So just behind that area and just to the north, there are going to be additional panels of art that are going to be repurposed from the old building, and then the additional art will be complementary to that. So we're not just doing new art, but we're also preserving the original art. The vertical element that you see there is kind of interesting. I'm not sure if there's any building in the city really that has both the stairs on the outside of the building. What that does, it brings eyeballs to the street. It creates movement up and down. So every time somebody takes a stair to their office or visits the building or leaves their office, we have people on the face of the building going up and down. And that brings vibrancy, it brings activity, it brings interest and intrigue. I can certainly see myself, being across the street and looking at all the people going up and down. So it really brings vibrancy. It literally brings people to the street, even though you're in the building traveling from one floor to the other. Activating the alley. So here's another really big goal of the specific plan that really didn't get us any credit, but even though we are providing the intent of that idea, so bringing the pedestrian and visibility towards the existing alleys is a big goal. So in this design, you can see right through the building, basically, because the building is floating up above the ground plane, and visually you can connect to the alley. And if you see something interesting, if there's a vendor back there, your friends are back there, well, go see them, because you can literally see through our building in essence. Not only visually, but just on the north side of our property, we're allowing pedestrian access. There was a small technicality by which we weren't able to achieve, right there. We weren't able to achieve the credit because of an easement issue, but pedestrians can still traverse from alley to the street freely. Another vision of the plan that is certainly enacted, but that didn't really quite get the benefit that was in the worksheet because of a technicality. Creative parking solutions. Parking is a really big challenge, and I don't know if there are any other parking systems that are either automatic or semi-automatic in the city, but we're doing it in a way that it's visible to everybody. So if you are at all intrigued or interested in how these systems work, it really is the way of the future. And so we really hope that people are interested, and I want people to stand out there and watch how it works so that they'll become more familiar. People in the East Coast are a lot more familiar with automated or semi-automated parking. Here in the West, we're just not. And so to put it out there and to partially screen it with landscaping, but allow people and the public to see it so it's not just underground is kind of a very kind of creative, celebratory way to kind of solve the parking solution. So really quickly on the bike racks, so it's not just the racks, it's kind of a dedication of private land. So the way that it's defined is every bike rack is 2 feet wide by 5 feet long, plus you need a 5-foot aisle in front of it. So there's a space, 5 feet long by 12 feet wide with the 5 feet in front of it that is earmarked for bicycle racks. So the owner is going to install the bicycle racks from day one for use. But I could certainly imagine if, for example, in the future the city feels like, hey, the bike rack should probably go away, and instead we should do parking for scooters or any kind of other mode of transportation. And so the bike rack thing is, first of all, it's available for anybody. So if I'm there first, I can park my bike there and nobody can say anything. And additionally, they're above the minimum required. So we already have 2 long-term and 2 short-term for the building. And then in addition to that, there's the additional bike rack provided for the city for anybody to use. And so it also reminds people there are other modes of transportation, And so it not only reminds them that there are other modes and encourages them to use it. A few other great things, the glazing, providing visibility in floor to ceiling, and wall to wall. It's kind of a great feature to allow people to visually see in and visually see out. And then, of course, we are quite literally stitching, or another benefit of the specific plan was to, as literally as you can, tie in the old and the new. So we are taking the old facade panels from the existing building and repurposing them. That's not only ecologically responsible, but it also it provides a literal way to stitch the old and the new and kind of create a reason to do it. And so by providing the panels in that kind of a fashion, not hiding them, actually celebrating those older panels. So I want to kind of wrap up by describing the challenge. So because it was a mid-block site, we were kind of at a disadvantage to begin with. So to create a design that was very attractive, and we were able to solve constructability issues and the easement issues and the leasability issues, plus the public benefit programs on such a compact site, it really was a challenge, but we think we did it kind of elegantly. It's seemingly really simple, but there's a lot of complexity there. And so to provide, so one more thing to share. So again, on the mid-block site, to provide access from the alley, plus open space in the alley, it's almost physically impossible to do everything. And so there's other points that we weren't able to achieve. But we think that the final outcome of the design, is really celebratory of the goals of the specific plan, quite literally. And okay, so sorry. Okay, one last thing to share, I suppose. It's been really fun working with this owner, because every decision that we made together was, well, how do we serve the community? How much better can we do? Can we make all the stairs accessible from the outside, make it visible, make it free and open? How do we celebrate the parking? We have so much more landscaping that's required. So we have vertical landscaping and horizontal landscaping and a feature tree. So it was such an great experience to work with an owner that really cared about the final outcome. And we think that the final outcome of the design and the organization really does speak to the love this particular owner has for the neighborhood. And I am available to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you. Any questions?
No.
All right, may I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved. Second.
All right, council discussion?
Nothing further.
It's a good-looking building.
It is nice.
I think it's a good addition. I can see the challenges being next to that very, very tall cinder block wall to the south. So orientating the stairs near that, I think, is nice. And I mean, now if you drive down that street, it's the Great Wall of China with nothing on it. So having a giant pillar there covered in art is, I think, from that stop sign at Eucalyptus and Grand looking down, I think it's going to be a wonderful addition to Smoky Hollow.
Yeah. Any comments?
Nothing.
All right.
Do we know if they're paying into the parking fees for the?
Oh, they're paying
for my diagonal parking, or are they
No.
covered by the 64
well,
spots
that's the
underneath?
$14,000. The $14,000 goes into the fee, right?
There is no in lieu payment
There's
for
no
this
in lieu payment
project.
with this one.
The $14,000 that they're paying for the community benefit will be utilized to provide angle parking in the future, part of it.
There you go.
There we go.
Our first
That gets-
$14,000.
That gets almost one spot.
All right, city attorney will read the resolution by title only.
Yes. A resolution approving Community Benefit Plan number 19-01 and Environmental Assessment number EA 1254 for development of a 14,119 square foot office building at 212 Eucalyptus Street is now ready for council's consideration.
May I have a motion to adopt the resolution?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, on to number 11. This is the time and place herein to fixed for a public hearing. City Clerk, was it proper notice of the hearing given to the in a timely manner?
Yes, it was.
City Clerk, has any written communication been received regarding this public hearing?
No written communication has been received in the city
The
clerk's
public hearing
office.
is now open. Mr. Nitmick, who will give the presentation? Or is that
I'll
Paul
speak,
again?
I'll speak for the city manager. I think Sam and Paul again.
Sam, Paul. You're back.
Okay. So this is also another application for a community benefits plan approval for, this time for a property at 140 Oregon Street in the Smoky Hollow Specific Plan again. Just to give you a sense again of where this project site is, still in Smoky Hollow, but it's farther east, a little closer to the Pacific Coast Highway than the previous site. This is an immediate area of the subject property. As you can see, the property takes up most of the block between Oregon Street, Franklin Avenue, Kansas Street, and El Segundo Boulevard to the south. The applicant intends to make improvements to this property over time, and these improvements include a parking structure that is actually nearing completion of construction right now, as well as other additions or improvements to buildings on the property. The subject request tonight affects two existing buildings on the northwest corner of the property, one building here and then another one here right at the corner. This building is intended to be demolished, and the other building, which is right at the corner, as I mentioned, is a one-story building, about 19,000 square feet in size, brick building that the applicant proposes to preserve and renovate and make an addition to this building that will kind of complement the existing building. This is an elevation of the building along Oregon Street. This addition consists of two new levels above the existing ground floor level. And these two new levels are extra tall because they accommodate some mezzanine space in each of the two levels on the inside. The overall building, once completed, will be approximately 85,000 square feet in size, but the site overall will be well below our FAR limits. This is, if I may, another perspective of the site from Franklin Avenue. One of the things that you might notice is that the top levels are actually stepped back significantly from the front facade on the ground floor, and that kind of helps to sort of mitigate that impact of the height from the pedestrian level. As mentioned in the last presentation, the specific plan allows for exceptions to standards in exchange for community benefits. In this case, the requested exception is for the building height. The height limit in the district is about 35 feet, and the application is for 55 feet for this building. There are two reasons for this requested exception. One reason or factor is that you may notice over here on the rendering and in your plans that there's kind of a slope on Oregon Street. It goes up as you get closer to El Segundo Boulevard. So if you'll see here, the ground floor level at this corner is actually significantly higher from the curb level, whereas as you go farther to the south, the same ground level is actually a little bit lower than the curb level there. That's one of the reasons. The other reason is the two mezzanines. The mezzanines that I mentioned earlier, that seems to be a very desired element in creative office type of buildings, and that's kind of the, let's say, aesthetic or atmosphere that the applicant is trying to create here on the site with this building. So this is the requested exception, and these are some of the proposed community benefits. So public art, some murals that will be installed on the building facades visible from the public, compliance with the design guidelines, including preserving that existing building and making that addition part of the whole, as well as providing outdoor seating spaces, a pedestrian passageway through the building to the other side and all the way to Franklin, And in addition, public infrastructure improvements, such as improving sidewalks and undergrounding overhead utilities. Again, the staff reviewed this proposal with these same 5 findings in mind, and using the methodology that you reviewed and approved at your January meeting. And staff believes that in this case as well, that these findings can be made, and we recommend that you adopt a draft resolution approving this community benefit plan as well. And I'll be happy to take questions. And the applicant is the same, so David and the applicant can also provide some additional info.
Okay, so now we said the public hearing is now open for public input.
Good evening, Council. Excited to be here. My name is Mark Telez. I'm owner and developer at the site, representing Smoky Hollow Industries. We're super excited to be part of this revitalization. As you know, we remodeled one site on the property, and we're days away from finishing the 400-car parking garage. In fact, we received our TCO, which was a big deal for us last week. Beyond Meat immediately started parking in it the same day. So now we just need to fill the rest of the parking lot. So in order to fill that parking lot, we need to build this building here. So super excited. The tenants we have on site already, Beyond Meat, as you know, we have a publicly funded advertising company that's worth like $50 billion. And so we have other big companies on site in addition to Beyond Meat that everyone knows about. We think we did everything necessary in order to achieve the community benefits. In fact, I don't think we looked at the numbers on this project here, but we're 3 times the requested community benefit. Little back history there. This was submitted in 2018 before the community benefit plan. So we kind of were shooting in the dark a little bit, but we're still super pleased with the result, and we're excited to put this thing. So we look forward to a yay and a yay and a yay tonight. Thank you.
Good evening again. Just want to fill in a few gaps. First of all, I want to send a special thank you to Maria, who was our planner. Paul is filling in today, and by the way, he did a great job. So thank you, Paul. So yes, we are not asking for anything but height, and as Paul really well described, there's that existing floor slab that is 4 foot 6.5 inches above the grade plane. So the height that we're asking for is only true on one side of or one corner of the property. As you get to the other corner of the property, we're actually well below the height being requested because of the slight sloping. And then Mark earlier just mentioned that just a little bit of the process and where we ended up in terms of the numbers. So we're exactly 2.5 times the minimum threshold in terms of dollars. And so that's $1,296,000 more than the 30% threshold. And as Mark was describing, we didn't know the specifics of the methodology until just a couple months ago in December. And so in the 2 years prior to that, we were just throwing everything in the kitchen sink into the design. And when it got finally assessed by the city's consultant, it turned out to be we were just significantly more in terms of value added versus the community benefits provided. The project is also transformative. Something that we are really kind of proud of is, so the building preserves the entire existing building. The other building that's being demolished is actually a tilt-up made more recently that has no architectural significance or character. We have a varied material palette. There's the red brick, the wonderful Corten, the black block, the exposed steel, and that's real steel. It's not fake steel. There's maybe 2 or 3 other buildings like this with exposed steel being the primary structure in the U.S. actually. The wood brings a little bit of softness, a little bit of a residential feel. The building overall design balances commercial development, but also providing large balconies, which is very residential. So it's got a great balance between a residential and a commercial look. The large cutout there is essentially a public way that anybody could use to go from this side of the property to the back side of the property. And it provides 2 pedestrian passageways It's actually one of the things in the plan that, again, didn't really quite get a point, but providing mid-block passages is encouraged, and we did that here. And there's significant right-of-way improvements, so we're actually removing 3 poles. And there's a great image in your packet that describes all the wires that are being removed, not only along Oregon, but also along Franklin as well. Everything is being undergrounded. Period lighting, of course, and we are also removing 2 curb cuts. So the site is being significantly improved, and there's a large portion of new sidewalk that isn't there today. And of course, removing poles and making things accessible, you're literally kind of improving the width of the sidewalk because you're removing obstacles that are currently there. Yes, and then of course a wholehearted kind of embrace of the public art. There's a very large mural being proposed on the garage, and a mural that harks back to the original property owner, the Rockefellers, along the more pedestrian Franklin side. And I'm available for questions.
The gentleman's comments here was about 127 Oregon. Was that what he said? He's on
Yeah.
the west side of Oregon?
Yeah.
And he was concerned,
Yes.
was that, we were talking about the undergrounding? Is that
Yes,
what his
so-
concern was?
Yeah, Mark has a little bit more feedback, but essentially, in order to do the improvements we needed to do, so we're removing 3 poles, 2 on Oregon Street on our side of the street, and 1 on Franklin Street on our side of the street. But in order to make the future power connection that's going to be undergrounded, and my understanding is a little fuzzy, but that gentleman's driveway is across a property line, so the driveway straddles the property line, and right where SCE wants to do that connection, you can't because there's a driveway there, essentially right between the 2 property lines. So SCE is proposing to add a new pole just outside of that gentleman's property line, and I think the anguish is that today there are 3 large conduits sticking out of the ground, which are going to be sawed off and removed once this future connection is made. Did I capture that correctly? The gentleman also complimented the design of the garage. It actually is really cool, and we appreciate the compliment.
So his concern will be eliminated
So the
at time of build, once this is built?
Yeah, well, the transformer and the meter have already been installed for the parking garage. This is for a new pole that's going to send high voltage to the parking garage to power the rest of the site. His concern were 4 conduits that are in the sidewalk right now. They're sticking out right now. We got permission from Edison to actually bury those underneath the finished concrete once the final installation is made. So his concern, you're correct. It
Will go
be
away.
within the next week, it will be gone.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. May I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Council discussion.
Second.
Oh, do we need a second?
To close the public meeting?
It's a public hearing. I think there's a motion, right? So motion and second.
Oh,
yeah.
second. All in favor?
Aye.
Council discussion.
It's 78% of the desired public benefit number, and that's a significant overage. And I would say, the observation of the sister building of this would seem to be a case in point of exactly what we are looking for when we approve this plan. I don't know what else we would ask for on this. I think that, it certainly transforms a block that has a Lowell, Massachusetts aesthetic to a California aesthetic in a remarkable way. I don't know what else I'd say.
Yeah, again, another great addition, I think, to the Smoky Hollow part of town, and thinking a lot about just this concept, the worksheet, how Smoky Hollow for the longest time was, a round peg fitting in a square block, and I think if you go back in the archives and the Planning Commission meetings, which I know you watch, Chris, for fun, I think I made the statement that, Sam, don't bring me another set of plans that has a box inside a box that says research and development, just so that it can get passed. And, I just love this because this is outside the box, but we now have means by which to bring it to the Planning Commission and bring it to the council to say, hey, this doesn't fit inside the box, but look, all these public benefits, 78% to the good,
it makes sense. It's what we want. It doesn't fit, inside this tiny little box that, building code allows for, but it's still a benefit to the community, and this still makes our town better. And so, yeah, I am in favor of this project. I think it's fantastic, and I'm excited to see it go up.
Yeah, and my compliments too to the developers, as well as thank you, Greg. This was your brainchild. I know this worksheet with your team, and I do believe, it gives us the ability to think outside the box and look for opportunity to move forward projects that we want in our town. So kudos to both of you. So City Attorney will read the resolution by title only.
Yes, a resolution approving Community Benefit Plan number 18-01 and Environmental Assessment number EA1233 to allow the construction of addition that exceeds the permitted building height in the Smoky Hollow Specific Plan area and located at 140 Oregon Street is now ready for council consideration.
All right, may I have a motion to adopt the resolution?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And then last thing, to Mr. Pimentel's comment earlier. So we're going to keep a laundry list of all the things in a record keeping, so that as new development comes, we can say, hey, we gave this equaled what we did for bikes, so there's bike racks, or we did this for landscaping. So we're going to build a repository of community benefit. Correct?
I think that's right, but I think I probably would look at it as kind of case studies. I mean, every project will be a case study of what we did and what the justifications were.
I agree with that as well, but we do need to have some consistency in how we favor, award community benefits. So I just want to make sure that there's some consistency with it.
It can be like office space. The minimum is 30%, but some of our projects do 78%.
All right.
And thank you for the applicant for sitting with us for 3 hours and 42 minutes.
Yes, thank you. You just love us, right? All right. All right, we're going to have Mr. Boyles come back.
I hear him.
He's peeking in. You got to prove. I had to give you a hard time.
All right, next up, we have item 12. Waive first reading and introduce an ordinance authorizing amendment to a contract between City Council and the Board of Administration of California Public Employees Retirement System, CalPERS. Adopt a resolution of intention to approve an amendment to a contract between the Board of Administration of CalPERS and City Council to provide Section 20516, employee sharing additional cost of 1% for classic local miscellaneous members and unrepresented management confidential group, and 3% for classic local safety members and unrepresented management confidential group, and approve staff to administer required employee election. And I see Mr. Serrano coming up to present.
Mayor, members of the council, good evening. So this item is brought back to you following negotiations with all of our other labor groups and the salary resolutions that were adopted for the management and confidential group. As indicated, this is for cost sharing, so the employees are picking up some additional costs, and the miscellaneous employees within the management confidential group will pick up the 1% for a total of 8%. And the safety members, which includes the police chief, the fire chief, and our 3 battalion chiefs, will pick up an additional 3% for a total of 12% cost sharing with the CalPERS agency. As required by CalPERS, this is this item has no fiscal impact in that the city is not spending more money, but the employees are picking up a bigger portion of that cost sharing to pay for the CalPERS retirement program. With that, I would recommend that council adopt the proposed ordinance or introduce by title only and waive the first reading. Schedule the ordinance for adoption at the council's April 21st meeting. and authorize us to continue to carry out the election by each of the management confidential members. Oh, one last item. The PEPRA employees that are in the management confidential group are not bound by this. There is a separate PEPRA law which CalPERS affixes their rates on an annual basis, and those rates will be going up in July, and we've given notice to those PEPRA employees of themselves. So with that, I'll answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, any questions? Okay, thank you. I'd like to introduce the ordinance.
I'll second it.
I'll go ahead and read the title. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of El Segundo authorizing an amendment to the contract between the City Council and the City of El Segundo and the Board of Administration of the California Public Employees Retirement System is now ready for adoption.
I'll introduce. That's good enough, right? Okay, thank you, sir. All right, thank you, Mr. Serrano.
Do we need to read
Reports,
the
City Clerk.
resolution?
Oh,
The
what's wrong?
resolution? Do we need to read that?
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. There's also a resolution as well with that item. I apologize.
For introduction?
Yeah, for adoption by the council, so.
We'll vote on that, okay. I
yeah,
move
so
it.
moved. No.
Okay. I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
4-0. Thank you. Thanks, Mona. Report from the city clerk.
Nothing this evening.
Okay, city treasurer, I don't see anyone. Councilmember Pimentel.
Nothing to report.
Thank you, Chris. Councilmember Nickel.
Just thank everyone for getting out and voting today. Thought about it the other day. I was explaining to my son about voting, and I realized that children today will never know what it's like when you panic the day of an election and you don't know what precinct you're supposed to vote at. And you got to figure out what precinct you're meant to vote at. And it may change depending if it's a presidential primary election or a local election. And now that you can go to any election site in LA County and vote. I mean, it's, I don't know, just that thought of that's something that my children will never experience. And so, yeah, it was definitely a different experience voting today and on the machines, and I hope everyone enjoyed it.
Thank you, Councilman Nickel. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, just want to thank, the elections are closed now. And so my running for city council was uncontested, as was Drew, and Tracy. So I want to congratulate. I just got a text with the early results. So we were elected, so congratulations. And
It was a low bar. Only took one. I'm pretty sure we each voted for ourselves.
But so I'm just thankful, and I thank you for being given the opportunity to serve the community. It's a community I love, and will continue to strive to ensure that we look at it, approach it with a strategic, fiscally focused mindset. So thank you, and I look forward to being up here 4 more years.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I just want to quickly point out that, I don't know if we have a photo of this, but we talked about it briefly at lunch. Do we?
Do we what?
I can describe it if not. This is just, I think, a testament to how seriously, well, I'll just provide a little context while Mona's pulling that up. But last week we were sitting at Chef Hanna's restaurant with City Manager Scott Mitnick and Deputy City Manager Barbara Voss, and Chef Hannes pointed out very passionately, as he does, this guy always has great feedback about Main Street. He's been there a long time. He's like the first restaurant of his kind in town, really. And he pointed out that, man, it's really difficult. First of all, the little piece of property right on the parkway looks like Kabul, and it really needs to improve. And where is it? It's kind of hard to see, but it's on the far right, and it's looking down that way past the tree. But trust me when I say that you would open up your doors, and it's right into a shrub, which happens in a couple different places in Main Street. And he's very passionate about it, and so I said, noted, thanks. Honestly, always great ideas. We'll see what we can do on that front. And today I was having lunch at Chef Hannes with Mr. Mitnick for our weekly one-on-one. And lo and behold, it was already fixed, and they were actually working on it. And Hannes sent me a message earlier in the day, was blown away. And so I just wanted to commend Meredith Pettit, who's not here tonight. Is she still? I know she was. No. Anyway, her department did a great job. Thank you, Scott, for making it happen. I think it's when we can move quickly as government, which is so difficult to do in so many cases, but when we can respond to a constituent's needs as quickly as we did, it's incredible. So I just want to take a moment to thank you guys. Well done. And like Carol, thank you very much. It's bittersweet, actually. I think Patel and family and friends, the fact that there are only 3 people running for 3 spots is somewhat of a weird feeling. Having said that, I certainly appreciate the time and money that we didn't have to spend this go-around, and I also want to believe and do believe that if there was people were really concerned about the direction we were headed as a city, we would have certainly had more people raise their hands. So thank you for the vote of confidence, and I also look forward to serving for another 4 years. City Attorney.
Nothing to report other than to say congratulations on your re-elections.
Thank you. City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and looking at no additional follow-up from tonight, but looking at the forecast, we'll have the Waypoint Affordable Housing second reading coming back. We don't have any public hearings, right? Oh, we're going to come back with the short-term rentals, though, right? We'll come back with that. We will also have the first quarter for fiscal year 1920 strategic plan report, update report. So you'll see where we are on that. And something that I think is exciting, because you have the Main Street downtown there, we're going to come back, we're going to come to council and ask if we can increase the frequency of the power washing of the sidewalks in the downtown to quarterly from semi-annual. And that'll be on your agenda on the 17th. That's it by way of follow-up. And congratulations.
Thank you,
Did we hear
Mr.
about
Mayor.
Measure T? Do we know?
Yeah, it's looking like it's going to pass. Right now, there's 63% yes versus 36% no.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mitnick. And let's see, public communication. Seeing none, we will adjourn. Thank you very much.